you appealed to Abraham Lincoln before. I mean, he blatantly tossed out many rules, but that was civil war. And so it's like you can't hold a president who is in the midst of a civil war like that to the same sort of standards of fidelity to the Constitution and the liberal order of things in the same way that you would have somebody now. It's just like such an unfair.
It's not
comparison.
the same way. It's just like it sounds like you're suggesting that civil war is the only context in which that's acceptable. But I don't know why that's the case. Why?
If you're doing that, then you need to be prepared to acknowledge that you are, by doing that, signaling an openness to civil war. Once you make a decision like that specific one of just like blatantly, the court says you have to release someone from prison, and then you say no. At that point, you need to, I'm not saying it's going to become a civil war, but if you're going to take that decision, you need to be able to say, like, I understand that this risks civil war, and I'm saying that it's necessary.
I think that you should be like a rule consequentialist and you should always stick to your principles and all that. But it's like, well, if your principles and if your current framework is going to get you killed, then, and in a circumstance where you could easily survive, then why don't you just to me, it doesn't make sense to try to hold to these principles. Like, people always criticize the Weimar Republic for Article 48 and it was misused and it was overused and everything. What if it wasn't used enough? What if after seeing those monarchist fuck judges give Hitler the most lenient fucking sentence for the beer hall putsch, just said, no, that's actually quite stupid. I'm going to invoke Article 48 to protect this democracy, this fragile state that we're in, to get this guy fucking executed, because he should be executed. By the actual standards of the Republic, he should be executed. The problem is that the system as it stands right now just doesn't have the willpower or the means to do so, right?
Yeah.
So you are breaking a rule there, kind of your democracy or the system that you've agreed to. The problem is that the system you've agreed to is not self-preserving. It's flawed. And you can either try to address that flaw the proper way when half the people participating in your system don't even care about the flaw and they like the flaw and they're abusing the flaw against you, or you have to remember that it's an ongoing process. And how many times in history have liberals or democracies gone a little bit left of center to try and preserve themselves? Like, fucking Churchill blew up a bunch of French sailors because they wouldn't hand their boats over to the British because they were afraid of it getting captured by the Germans. He killed like 1,000 of his own allies, right? That's obviously against any liberal, even of the time, that's against your principles. Even before the Geneva Convention, that would have been against principle. And Churchill in his fucking radio talking about it afterwards, but it was a very painful decision to make. It was with great weight and with great regret that
that was pretty good, actually.
Heart, but you kind of had to do what you had to do in very fucking specific circumstances. And I think that should be treated the same way. So like this idea that there's some kind of like taboo around the executive breaking the norms to push to prosecute people who are literally not even trying to be part of the system,
Well, on that last point, I'm not sure that I agree fully, but I don't disagree with the premise of breaking norms, breaking from like a dogmatic adherence to norms. But here, let's hello
Hutch.
Hey man, what's going on?
Oh, just gaming.
Well, first off, I wanted to get your thoughts on so apparently you had a debate with Westside Tyler as well, is this correct?
Yeah,
and
a long time ago now.
And I'm told that went kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, he's crazy. Yeah, he just started shouting and monologuing over me for most of it, but he was debating me on the pager attacks in Lebanon, and it didn't take that long for me to realize that he literally knows nothing about Israel or Lebanon or pagers or Hezbollah or anything. So yeah, I think he just got triggered very early on when he couldn't answer a couple of his simple questions, or he answered them badly. And then it was a good debate, though. Good memes. I didn't have to do much.
So I am technically what the kids call neurodivergent. Are you? I'm just curious. Yeah. So it's okay for me to ask, like, is it? I'm not even kidding when I say this. Like, the anti-fan behavior. Are we talking about like mental illness? Is that what's going on with like a lot of these people? Would they? Because they get into their minds and it's like, it's obvious when I'm talking to this guy that he genuinely believes that I'm this like pro-segregationist liberal, I guess, like pro-Kamala, pro-segregationist liberal, and that I want to like bring segregation back. And it's like not a bit.
That part is probably not mental illness. That part is probably that's partly ideology and partly just if enough people say a thing, that the crowd says something and people are going to believe it. And they definitely don't want to concede that they're wrong about it on the spot with you, because why would you cede ground to someone who might be a segregationist, right?
Yeah, but that's wild to me. Like if I'm in a conversation with someone and it turns out that I'm wrong about something, it's really not that hard for me to just say like, oh, I got that wrong. But for some reason, like 95% of the people in the space, they will debate bro themselves into the most insane positions in order to avoid saying just simply, oh, I must have had the wrong impression, which is like not a big deal. Who gives a fuck? That happens all the time. But because he debate broed himself into me 100% being like pro-segregation or like proud of my Confederate lineage, he had to take the position that it's pro-segregation to not want to be in a political coalition with Hassan. Like, I don't know if you saw that whole debate, but it was fucking insane.
Yeah, I saw him saying that. Yeah, but this is just people who think they're good at conversations because are good at debates because they just shout at people and steamroll. But yeah, like I don't think, no, I don't see any like mental. I mean, as far as Tyler goes, I think he might actually just be like brain damaged. But in any case, like that behavior doesn't have to be mentally ill. It doesn't have to be anything. You can be a completely functioning human being and still behave like that. It's just like ideology can color people's worldviews. Like I guess pride can be a big part of it, especially with men, right? Like the first thing I saw with what he was talking to you is that he was quizzing you on civics, and then he immediately accused you of using a chat GBT knowledge, even though you seem to know more than he did about the federal versus civil court thing in the Supreme Court and everything else. So I don't know. It just sounded more like that's just insecurity, but insecurity can lead to very irrational behavior from people, especially from men.
I mean, it's just, I don't know. I get kind of creeped out when I'm confronted with it because I just don't understand how people I don't understand how people work that way. I mean, it is kind of crazy too. I'm just looking up like the different neurodivergent conditions that can be associated with having difficulty detecting sarcasm. And it's actually kind of it's not just autism spectrum disorder. It's, there's like quite a few here. So don't you think like, I don't know, I feel like there's something to my theory that the people that kind of box themselves into these insane positions because they can't understand. So like I have talked about, like I do literally descend from like a really famous like Confederate soldier, but
Nice.
I've never expressed any like pride in that. In fact, I've expressed like being happy that my interracial relationship and my fucking family that I have which is like wildly diverse at this point.
Is it one of those things that got clipped and could be interpreted in a certain way, or
I
is
guess
the clip itself clear enough?
I mean, I'm very easily clippable. I don't think about that. I just kind of talk and say stupid shit, and so I'm very, very easily clippable. So it's possible he saw a clip and just jump to some conclusion, but I don't know. I feel like there's something there. I feel like there's communities of people online that have like a real a lot of difficulty picking up on sarcasm. That's the only way I can explain this.
I mean, it's also no, not entirely. Like again, you can go down that road and you'll personally go insane trying to find out whether the people you're talking to or fighting with are insane through the internet. That's quite difficult to do. But the problem is that what people are doing there, especially with political issues, is that they're doing something that people have been doing since the dawn of time. Is that you have like it takes like people are complex human beings, and coming to a certain judgment about someone's character is like a really difficult thing to do. You have to get to know someone for a while. There's so much about their life that you're generally not going to know about at all, or what's in their head or anything like that. But you have to, in politics, you need to be quick, right? You need to make judgments. And what people do is they tend to, once you've seen something like one or two things that someone says in a clip, or you see a narrative going on around someone, well, then you've like the essentializing has already happened like very, very quickly. And then after a certain point, you are literally just going to only hear stuff that they say that confirms whatever you've essentialized and just ignore the rest. It seems to be like a tactic or just like a heuristic that people go by, because otherwise the world would be difficult, right? And that's the problem. I think maybe with you is that you don't seem to have any crazy, like massively extremist opinions. Even people who hate you might admit to that. But the problem with that is that it also means that people who do have a vitriolic and like viscerally hateful reaction to things that you say or opinions that you have are probably going to be crazy, or they're going to be more extreme. They're going to be more out there. So, yeah, it's a kind of, it's almost like a natural occurrence.
Yeah, the human mind, the instinct to simplify things so you can understand the world is a very human thing. So I don't know. I think part of it also goes away / gets better as you get older, because I definitely recall being younger and jumping to wild conclusions about people and ultimately being proven wrong, but having a really hard time moving off of that opinion. I feel like that was very, like, a lot more common when I was younger. And I guess when you get older, you have those kind of experiences more, where your initial assumption was just dead wrong, and so you begin to naturally be more kind of open to people. I don't know. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the film called They Live?
No. Is that like an old, like, 80s horror
It's an
film?
old film, yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like the kind of film that you would definitely like. I don't know. It's you know the whole obey meme that incidentally a bunch of right wingers started using. Like there's the cap, like the poster that says obey.
Oh yeah. I know,
It's like this. It's like this. Yeah, it's an old horror film about aliens have taken over the world, and the main character stumbles across a box of fucking sunglasses. And if you put the sunglasses on, you can see the world as it really is. So you start to notice that some of the people are actually aliens, and all the signs that are like billboards selling goods are actually saying marry and reproduce and all this kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
And money is your god, like that kind of nonsense. Yeah, like it's very primitive. Like the writing is quite like juvenile almost, but there's this whole epic scene in it where the guy is trying to convince his friend after he's figured out what's gone on, and he's running away from the law because he's ended up fighting against the system, and he's trying to convince his friend of what he's seen, and he's trying to get his friend to put on the sunglasses, but his friend doesn't really trust him because he's just been fighting with cops and he's like a fugitive, so he doesn't want to put the glasses on, and they end up fighting. And it's like the longest, or one of the longest fight scenes you'll ever see in a film. There's just these two guys beating the shit out of each other because the guy's friend won't put the sunglasses on, right?
Gotcha.
And I once heard this analysis of that scene, which is that it's supposed to be like quite symbolic of the whole visceral and painful experience of trying to convince someone that they're wrong of something, and them not, or trying to show someone like, oh, if you just like read this thing or look at this fact check or look at this context and all that, but they just won't do it, and they don't want to do it because the whole thing about feeling that your worldview or something like that is wrong is like it is like that. It's like a painful experience. It's like fighting to the death with another guy who's like equally strong as you, and
yeah, that is very relevant to the conversation.
It's kind of how I feel when I watch Live and Learn, eh?
What was your I don't know. That's a bit drama pilled. We had an interesting few weeks of discourse on Live and Learn. But thankfully the last episode it was about arguing with a guest more than my co-host. So I don't know if you got a chance to see the conversation with Rashad. It was like 2.5 hours long, so I don't know if you watched the whole thing, but
not the whole thing, but I got the gist. I'm guessing this is all about the whole. I mean, when you said we were going to fight today, I was expecting something to do with that and the conversation you had with Josiah about bending the rules or breaking the norms a little bit to preserve democracy. Is that more or less the fight that you're having right now, as you see it? Yeah,
that's been ongoing for a while, but I guess it picked up a little bit more because Rashad took it to a further extreme. But a clip of you popped up on my feed. It's like 2 minutes and 22 seconds here. And it was you talking about the topic that we were unpacking. But now I'm just curious because, I mean, I guess it is entirely possible that I'm horrible at articulating what I actually think. So I'm curious what you think my position is, just broadly on the topic?
Okay, I will give you the most simple distillation. It sounds like you're Batman and you don't want to break your rule. You don't want to kill the Joker.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yes, kind of. You could expand on that a little bit more. I just want to know if you have, like, before we
It
debate.
sounds like people like Josiah and Destiny and Rashad, maybe albeit with less convincing examples, want you to. They think that once Democrats come back into office, or what they should have done in pre-2024, is that they should have been willing to break norms and act a little bit out of their regular purview to stay the threat of MAGA ever becoming a thing again. So I think Josiah's example there was something to do with the FCC looking into Fox News after the Dominion case. I guess there's maybe also stuff to do with Merrick Garland, which is probably where I'd have a stronger opinion. And then from watching that, I was starting to think about, well, what was this like with other countries? And I don't know if you know much about the whole debate about the Weimar Republic and what they could have done to stop the Nazis, and and the whole debate that goes around that.
I'm not great on that history. I know, like, the very broad strokes of all that, but yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to give you an example from there, or do you want to tell me?
Definitely. Go for it. Yeah.
Right. So starting with the beer hall putsch, I'll just go through the whole thing, even if you know some of it. So the beer hall putsch is basically when Hitler is basically still a nobody, 1923, 24. He tries to take over the sort of like municipality in Munich, and then he eventually wants to march on Berlin. So he launches a coup, basically, kidnaps some people, tries to get the police and the military involved, and then it stops very quickly. A bunch of people get shot and killed by the military, and then he gets jailed. So Hitler has tried to basically launch a coup against the government to take over with brown shirts and just like a bit of local support. He goes to court, and because the Weimar Republic, in its inception, made a compromise with the old order, with the monarchy, and people who supported it, that people who were civil servants, who were appointed by the Kaiser, would a lot of them would stay. So the problem with the Weimar Republic to begin with is that their judiciary and a lot of their civil service was full of people who had sympathies with the monarchy and didn't like the new democratic system. So when Hitler goes on trial for trying to coup the government, he is given a very, very special treatment by the judges because they kind of are a bit curious about him. Like, they like the way he talks. They kind of like they sympathize a lot with his narrative. They allow him to bulldoze witnesses, and they allow him to give like a 2 or 3 hour opening statement, like all this kind of shit. And eventually they give him a very lenient sentence of 5 years. He gets out in 9 months. And the Nazi Party is banned briefly, but then they get unbanned a few years later. So my argument is that there was quite a good opportunity for the president, who was a social democrat at the time, to intervene and to say, another context, the Weimar Republic had this provision in their constitution called Article 48, which basically meant that the president could suspend civil liberties and rule by decree in emergency situations. And they could like deploy the military into different parts of the country to suppress dissent or whatever. And they used this a lot. It was very overused. And people often say that this article was actually it was eventually used by Hitler to dissolve or Hindenburg to dissolve the Reichstag and allow Hitler and the president to rule by decree.
Right.
In 33. But my thought was, what if they actually hadn't been overusing it? What if they'd been underusing it? Because I think when you get this guy, this crazy fuck who tries to coup the government and is getting special treatment from this monarchist judiciary, why not use Article 48 there to try Hitler under a military court for what he's done? And by the standards of that time, if he had been tried under a military court, he would have probably been executed. And I think he should have been, because that's the standards of the time. Like, he should have been executed for what he did. Or at the very least, jailed for the rest of his life and definitely never allowed to run for office as long as he lives.
Gotcha.
With what you've heard there, would you support or oppose that decision?
I would have to look more into the specifics, but you sound reasonable in your argument. I can say that.
Even though them using the article in that way was violating precedent. Like, that precedent had been used to quell like paramilitary groups and things like that, but it hadn't really been used because the state or civil courts, the civilian courts, hadn't given you a result that you wanted, right?
I think I am struggling to draw a parallel to modern America because our institutions are much stronger than as now again, like you're more qualified to go into the details, but my rudimentary understanding is like one of the reasons why countries like Italy and Germany fell to fascism is because their institutions were way weaker than ours are currently.
Yeah.
And so what might have been a valid prescription at the time, I don't know if that necessarily, if you can apply the same logic, because it is a different kind of calculation.
Yeah, it's more just like it's more like a general, it's more of like a general principle in that doing something that you technically can do, but it goes against one, precedent, and two, what you would typically expect like a liberal democracy to do, right?
So I'm not principally opposed to that. I'm not principally opposed to abandoning norms or getting creative or breaking precedent in extraordinary times to deal with some kind of extraordinary threat. I'm not opposed to that at all. It's just a case by case. And you would have to sell me on the merits of each individual pitch. So, the filibuster, for example, that's a Senate rule. Yeah. It's a norm. I think it's outlived its usefulness. I think the argument for the filibuster was way stronger when we actually had a Congress that was willing to work in a bipartisan fashion pretty regularly for decades. And so you just didn't have the kind of gridlock that you're dealing with now. And I'm not sure if you saw, but there was an interview that Brian Tyler Cohen did recently with Barack Obama. And he talked he did a really good job of like laying out the reasoning for why the filibuster, why Democrats should take a long, like hard look at that rule. And it's because there's this asymmetry in our aspirations as parties. The Republican Party, much of what they want to do, I mean, literally like 80-90% of what they actually want to do when someone like Donald Trump comes into office, they can do without legislation or without a filibuster-proof bill or without, these kinds of things, without a constitutional amendment. They can, like Donald Trump can just do a lot of stuff with executive power. And then you go over to the Democratic side of the aisle, and the Democratic voter base are really passionately asking for big reforms, things that, transform the healthcare system or maybe even, they want to do like a lot of like social democratic policies, like you see in the Nordic states and these kinds of things. And these require 60 votes in the Senate, which is just basically unthinkable right now in the current moment. And on top of that, it's hard to imagine either party getting to a 60 vote threshold in the next like 10 years. I mean, it could happen. There could be some kind of sea change that occurs and then that changes the landscape. But because of that gridlock, I mean, this gridlock disproportionately, and I mean massively disproportionately, favors Republicans. Like they benefit from this gridlock tremendously. And so for that reason, I don't think, even though I do think that the filibuster did at one point serve a useful function, I'm at a point now where I am on board with getting rid of it. Acknowledging the downsides. Like there's a lot of that, there's stuff that comes with that makes me really uncomfortable. Like I'm really glad that the filibuster exists right now, for example, while we are the minority party. So it's just a case by case. And on the particular issue of Gavin Newsom, hypothetical Gavin Newsom, President Newsom, campaigning on basically like lock them up and then getting sworn in 2029 and doing an executive order to instruct DOJ to investigate the previous administration. I think I can give you very practical, pragmatic reasons that go beyond any kind of sanctity of norms. Like I'm not, the case that I want to make against Gavin Newsom doing that is not one of, well, this is a norm that we have to protect. Like it's not, there's just very practical political reasons why I think that this would be stupid. And then some of it has to do with the norm, but yeah, I don't know if you have any response there.
Was that an example that was brought up by Rashad, or was that like a Josiah or Pisco's one, the Gavin Newsom executive order?
That was Josiah and Pisco and, you know, probably 90% of my chat and like a lot of people on social media.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's coming back to me. So as far as, because the way to do it to me is a bit more vague because I don't know the American system like well enough for that decision. But okay. So for one, do you agree that there's a problem in America in the sense that you had someone who tried to coup the government, Trump, and you had all of his friends who helped him, and they're most of them are just kind of like waddling around, just like happy dandy and doing their thing, and there's not really all that much stopping them from doing a lot of the same crazy shit that they did before, and Trump is now president. Like that's obviously like an issue, right? Like, do you think that like the fact that Trump, so the way I stand right now is that Trump shouldn't have been allowed to run for office in 2024.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what went wrong there?
There's a really simple solution, or there's a really simple answer to your question. It's not complicated. There's significant rot in the Republican Party right now. So if we rewind the clock back to 1973, 1974, hold on, what year was Watergate? What year did Nixon resign? I think it was 1974. Bugging me, I'm sorry. It was 1974. The Republican Party at that time, I mean, I don't know how much you know about U.S. history. You know, you seem to be like really informed on history stuff, but like at the time, the Republican Party was really strong. Nixon in '68 just absolutely blew the fuck out of the Democratic nominee, this guy named Humphrey. And in 1972, it was a Reagan-Mondale landslide. He won every single state except for one state. And so the Republican Party at that time had so much power, way more power than they currently have, with more kind of evenly split margins in the Congress and a not really convincing electoral win from Trump in November 2024. But even then, back then, you had a Republican Party that actually seemed to have people with actual principles, that actually believed in the principles of liberal democracy. And you know, they saw what Nixon did with Watergate as more and more stuff came out and became public information. They reached a point where they believed that it was just untenable to have him stay in office. And so, you know, the Republican leadership in Congress at the time went to the White House, sat down with Nixon and told him, listen, you can either resign and get a pardon from Ford, or we will impeach you, we will convict you in the Senate, and there will be criminal charges. And he decided to resign. We don't have that Republican Party now. That Republican Party, the rot has been increasing year over year for decades. It's just been getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And now we're in a situation where it's basically like Frankenstein's monster. And the party in terms of the people that are in the Congress are just, they're all sycophants. They're all corrupt. None of them have any kind of like principle allegiance to the Constitution, to the American system of government. They're all purely motivated by self-interest. They, you know, want to leverage their friendly relationship with Donald Trump to, you know, advance their careers once they leave office, do podcasts, whatever the fuck they're going to do. And so there's just no mechanism of accountability that we can rely on from the Republican side of the aisle. So that was a bit long-winded, but that's basically what's happening right now, because there would have been a political solution to make sure that Donald Trump was not able to run for office after January 6th. It would have been the second impeachment. You know, the Democrats impeached Donald Trump in the House. It kicked over to the Senate. There was some early reporting that McConnell was considering trying to whip votes behind the scenes to convict him in the Senate to make sure that he could never run for office ever again. There were a lot of Republicans in the Congress at the time that were, you know, very pissed off about what happened on January 6th. And then McConnell got cold feet and decided not to do that. And, you know, there was another mechanism to make sure that he couldn't run again. Well, actually, I don't even know technically, but, you know, if the court cases had played out, he would have lost in court, in federal court against Jack Smith. He very, very likely would have been sentenced to, you know, prison. And I doubt he would have won election. I mean, technically, I think you can run even if you're in prison, but I really doubt he would have won if he was in prison. So, yeah.
Okay. Right. So, okay. First of all, listen. I love you. You're my boy. With the greatest respect, someone I fucking asked. Okay. I was asking what the problem. Obviously, the Republicans are fucked, right? Yeah. Like the problem right now, and when people mentioned the Weimar Republic, I agree. The challenges are not the same as uh, as what you have in America. That's true. But there is one central core problem, which is that the Weimar Republic was a democracy without Democrats. And now America is a democracy without Democrats, at least like half of them, right? Or more in the House and Senate. So the issue we have now is that, yeah, Republicans are fucked, but it's what Democrats can do to unfuck them, right? Or to counter it. Um, I was wanting to know more like what the Democrats could have done in 2024 or pre-2024 to deal with that issue. So like for me, I understand why Biden picked Merrick Garland. I can steelman that. But the problem is that you had this issue where the issue of whether Trump wasn't even fit or unfit for office, it wasn't even resolved, right? It wasn't even answered legal election with this guy who tried to coup the government being allowed to run for office, and not the question of whether or not he tried to coup the government being answered legally. Like, what's going on here? Can we speed this up or what?
What would have been the problem with that?
Yeah.
Um, well, there's a few ways of getting at that. I mean, there's a few different answers there, but if I want to restrict it to, first of all, hang on. Didn't you tell me what was the question you asked me that I did that answer for?
Oh, I was kind of joking. I was just saying what went wrong. Like what went wrong that allowed Trump to run for office? And you pointed to like problems
Oh,
with the Republican
I got
Party.
lost in the
Whereas
historical
I was more
analytics.
asking,
Okay.
yeah, I was asked, yeah. And I was
Okay.
asking what, obviously Republicans are fucked, but we're in a position right now where it's like, yeah, the hordes are battering at the gates, and we're just like, why is this happening? And it's like,
Okay.
oh well, there are a bunch of hordes. They just don't like us that. Oh yeah, we know the hordes are fucked. I just want to know what the defenders can do. Yeah, the
No, but
Democrats, what they should have done. Yeah.
my point was that it's not something that one political party necessarily has the power to do on their own. And in the case
Okay,
of,
that's a problem then.
I mean, it is a problem. But this is one of the imperfections, I guess, of like liberal democracy. You can't really have a situation where a party can just, unilaterally stop someone from running for president, especially if that person still has the support of, 40 to 45% of the country. It's not something that they can just like do on their own. And as far as like what the issue would have been for Biden to do what you suggest, well, I think the issue is pretty obvious there. Merrick Garland was a Boy Scout. Like he was a fierce institutionalist. He did have respect for the longstanding norm of an independent DOJ. And if Biden would have done that, Merrick Garland literally would have resigned that day and probably gone to the media to say, I was asked to do this. I'm resigning.
Mm-hmm.
This is, beneath the office of the presidency and da 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 da. So that would have just been a major fucking scandal for the Biden administration. I mean, that would have he was already on thin ice at that point. The public had already lost confidence in him because he was visibly aging and very easily clippable and, and all that stuff. And so if you would have added this on top of that, that would have really, that would have been devastating, I think, for his presidency. I think Donald Trump would have won by even more.
Okay, so it would have had to probably be like an executive order, right? Like if he was going to do it rather than doing it sneakily. And he probably just shouldn't have appointed Merrick Garland at all. He should have probably appointed someone who was actually going to do the thing. Because to me, you said Merrick Garland was an institutionalist. I don't even know if I agree with that in practice, because I think you get to a point where you're being so institutionalist that you're willing to like sacrifice the sanctity of your institutions to stick to like a particular norm. Because here you've got like a double-edged sword. Like there's like a catch-22. One is that you be the institutionalist and you don't break the norms and you do things like by the books or by the norms and all that and try not to look political by any means necessary. But then the cost of that is that an insurrectionist gets to run for president without it even going through the courts of that he's an insurrectionist, right?
Well,
without that even being legally resolved.
Well, I mean, Merrick Garland didn't have the power to stop him from running for president. Even if Donald Trump would have, I just said a moment ago, I think he would have lost if he was in prison, but Merrick Garland had no authority. Like, you can be a convicted felon and run for president. Like,
no, but I mean the process of going after him for the voter fraud case. No.
For the voter fraud case? Which case?
Well, with the fake electors, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. If he would have initiated criminal proceedings right away, like, month one of the Biden presidency, instead of waiting, I think it was like a year before he appointed a special counsel, or maybe a year and a half. I don't really recall the timeline. But even if that would have played out and Donald Trump would have been convicted and sent to prison, like, you can technically run for office like from prison. So I don't know if I'm being too technical here or
no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, because the problem there is that obviously like that technically wouldn't have been insurrection. He probably I'd assume he would have probably gone to prison for that, or but then there's still a problem there because is your argument basically that wouldn't have because it's technically not insurrection, like he can still run again, like the 14th Amendment doesn't stop him, even if he's been found to literally try to coup the government with, he's guilty of a coup, but not an insurrection, right? Like,
Jack Smith didn't charge him with insurrection, but like...
Yeah, I know, yeah.
So let me just say real quick, I fully agree that Merrick Garland drug his feet, and, I think even more egregiously than on the Jan 6 stuff, because he could have, as soon as he was confirmed by the Senate and took over that job, he could have appointed a special counsel day one to look into the Jan 6 stuff. But even more dead to rights was the classified document stuff in Florida. I don't know how familiar you are with that case.
Yeah, I read through the indictment, the first one. Yeah.
Okay, so they had him fucking dead to rights. Really quickly into Biden's term. They knew, like the DOJ, FBI, Garland, they knew that he was lying to them about what documents they had. They knew that he was trying to get his subordinates to, lie to FBI investigators. They were moving the documents from here and there. They were trying to literally destroy evidence. They knew he was doing that for fucking like a year and a half before they finally did a raid in Mar-a-Lago. And that case was a fucking slam dunk. And so the fact that Garland waited as long as he did, I think that was because he was concerned about the appearance of any kind of like political influence in the investigation. But in that caution, he sort of indirectly caused, I think, Trump's second term. And so I would never fight anyone on the idea that Merrick Garland waited too long. I would not fight anyone who said that Biden, who think that Biden appointed the wrong person for that job. He should have appointed more of a bulldog. He appointed Merrick Garland, I think, in an attempt to sort of like, in part, try to right a wrong, because Merrick Garland was denied a confirmation hearing to become the successor to Scalia after he died, Scalia after he died. And so Biden, that was like, I think his attempt at like balance or justice or something like that.
Yeah, or it might have also been because at least someone who was knowingly going to be like a bit more soft like Merrick Garland could have also been what helped Biden secure his legislative agenda, which required Republican input, right? So maybe he just decided that like the legislative agenda was more important than the prosecutions against Trump, which I can understand as a steelman if that's actually why he was doing it. But in any case, sorry, just to address fucking DV in my chat saying, Loner, you'd have no idea what you're talking about. Please educate yourself on what is legal. You fucking inbred retard. I'm trying to go through like a Socratic method with my friend Hutch here. He's just taking a bit of time to answer his questions. So I'm just trying to get to the point. The point I'm trying to get to is my understanding of the 14th Amendment and Section 3. No, I'm not having it's okay.
Am I being too long-winded?
No, it's okay. Nothing you're saying is irrelevant.
You can tell me. You can tell me.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm trying to get to this idea that with 14th Amendment 3 or whatever, am I correct that insurrection doesn't need to be a criminal conviction, right? To disqualify?
I got to be honest with you. I don't know. I'm not the legal guy. I don't read legal, yeah.
Right. So the problem that I seem to have run into, and I'm trying to understand this with the 14th Amendment, is that it says that like someone who's an insurrectionist or rebellion or whatever, they can't run for president. But I don't think it actually says that it has, or I don't think it's understood that it has to be like a criminal conviction, which is why I think the states were trying to have their input. But then the problem I run into is like, even if that's the case, then like who enforces it? The problem I'm trying to like get through is that it seems like there is a fundamental problem in the American system itself that has allowed this to happen. It shouldn't really be the case that it depends on who you pick as the head of the DOJ on whether or not a guy who tries to coup the government can run for president. Like it shouldn't, that should be settled every single time it happens into eternity. But in this case, it wasn't only that it wasn't even applied, it was that it was like, the question wasn't even answered. It's not like he even got like exonerated by the court. It was left standing.
So real quick. Someone in my chat said SCOTUS said that Congress needs to apply the disqualification.
Yes, they said that, but then I think if you looked at the concurring opinions from quite a few of the justices, was they actually believed that that was an overstep because they were trying to make the case that states couldn't do it, but like whether the Congress would be the only body to do that, because that doesn't make sense either, right? Like if they're saying that if it's now the Congress that has to be the ones who decide to enforce it, then what? So if a guy tries to coup the government, but it's not legally an insurrection, then you still need 2/3 of the Congress to enforce that provision of the 14th Amendment. That doesn't make any sense. That just means as long as you have like more than 40% of the Congress is anti-democracy, then it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, so my problem here is that the system itself is fucked. Like the system itself has a hole in it that might not have been anticipated by the founders or whatever else, or by norms and precedent, has not adequately dealt with this, which is why when you have that issue, I have much less of an issue with things like going against these norms, because right now the norms are actually pragmatically fucked as it is, because they have basically allowed this situation to happen without the appropriate recourse, which is why I'm not so. I'd be struggling to see why, like an executive order to get the DOJ to actually pursue these people and get criminal convictions and set some precedent that if you try to do this, you should never be allowed near an office for the rest of your life. That this is just going to keep happening, that Republicans aren't going to change.
So, I mean, listen, I fully agree that there are systemic problems in the United States right now. It is crazy that someone like Donald Trump, after doing what he did, was allowed to run for office again. And I certainly agree that Merrick Garland, while I think he was a really good AG and he seems to be like a very serious person, you know, he prosecuted Democrats, for example. And so overall, I think he was a fantastic AG. And the way that he did it was the correct way to do that, to appoint a special counsel. Like the point of the special counsel is to instill a sense of confidence in the public that that investigation is being done free of any kind of political influence. And so like the way he went about doing it was correct. And the way that Jack Smith moved, I mean, he moved like very fast, you know. He was like, Jack Smith was really good. And I do feel extremely confident that he would have secured guilty convictions in probably both jurisdictions. That's not really my issue at all. My issue, instead of like, so I do think it's a really good norm to separate DOJ from the president. Like after Nixon, we did these reforms, and I think that was a really good norm to establish. The presidency and the executive branch and the agencies, their reputations were extremely damaged in the eyes of the public after Watergate. Like Watergate was a significant national trauma. I don't think people realized like what a big deal it was at the time, but it really broke a lot of people's hearts. You could argue that it was like one of the things that really kind of set us on this dark path was like the trauma of that. Because in the decades before that, America was kind of defined by really kind of unbridled optimism and, you know, the conflict with the Soviets, and it was just a much more positive thing. And then after that whole Watergate scandal came out, and it, you know, people just plainly saw that the president was just like really nakedly, blatantly corrupt. It was like traumatizing for a lot of Americans. And so, and it's just generally a good rule to have. We should not have a criminal justice system. We should not have an agency like the Department of Justice that are acting as personal instruments of the president. It's just not a good thing to happen. And if you just open that box again, then I think you're just speed running. I mean, I understand that people's opinions in America of our institutions is already at a low point right now. But that doesn't mean that we just abandon that principle altogether and just, you know, just like get rid of that norm. So I do believe in preserving that norm just on the merits. But what I'm offering to you, and I don't think you responded, I don't think you really responded to that, was like the practical reason why that this is not a good option. If Biden would have done that, that would have sunk his presidency. I mean, he had this insanely good legislative track record. If he would have done what what you think that he should have done, really early on in his presidency, that would have killed maybe all of the efforts past like the ARP, like every piece of legislation that would have been like, I don't think any of that would have gotten done. Because as soon as you embroil a president in a scandal like that, and their approval numbers go down, and you make the entire party vulnerable to attacks from Republicans in that kind of way, well, he's not going to get any bills done. He's going to spend all his time on the back foot on defense about this thing. We're probably going to lose. Like, it would have been an actual red wave in the midterm elections. We wouldn't have picked up a seat in the Senate. And it would have, I think, like galvanized Donald Trump's support. I think it would have freaked out a lot of normies that are kind of disengaged from politics. They would have felt like this was not okay. And before you even say it, I understand there's a massive double standard here, because Donald Trump just, he got inaugurated, and like one of the first things he did was do this. But I have more on that, but I don't want to be too talky. So I don't know if you want to jump in here.
No, that's fine. Yeah, like the problem there as well, though, is just that what's the Republican base going to accuse Trump of doing that they weren't already? Biden, sorry, they're already accusing Biden of like political witch hunting or whatever else. But in this situation, I don't. That prediction is maybe like phase one of what might happen. But if he actually does manage to, through his intervention, expedite the process of putting Trump through like a proper hearing on the fake elector scheme, then the next phase of that also is why doesn't anything that comes out of that trial or that hearing become national news and fuck the Republicans even more? Like, what if Trump's having to go and explain himself in front of a court about the fake elector scheme and stuff that he says before and afterwards when he's in the hearing? Like that, why wouldn't that start to come into the news cycle? I think we actually ran into an issue in the opposite direction, which is that up to 2024, half the country doesn't even seem to know what the fake elector scheme was. Even a lot of Democrats don't know what it was or really understand what happened. So
more than half, probably 80% of the country could not tell you.
And
what
someone's
that
saying
was
federal courts aren't public. Yeah, I know, but that doesn't mean that if the decision isn't being expedited, then obviously findings from that are going to come out, aren't they? Like, that's not going to be buried if he's going through that procedure. We learned about the guilty on 34 counts when that finished. So why wouldn't the same happen with the fake electors trial? Well, why wouldn't that color voters' opinions?
I run into this argument a lot where I'll play out the tape of some proposal, and the thing that people hit me with a lot is what you just said, which is like, well, the Republicans are just going to accuse the Democrats of X anyways, and so what difference does it make? I get a little frustrated with this line of reasoning, because it almost amounts to the idea that the Republican base is the only thing that matters in the American electorate. And they're not. Like, of course, the Republican base, they're mostly kind of insane and will accuse every Democratic president of the most unhinged shit you could possibly imagine, as is evidenced by, Obama's 2 terms and Biden. Biden shitting his pants in front of the Pope and fucking molesting children, and Barack Obama being like a secret sleeper cell for Al Qaeda, and like, they're gonna be insane and do all that stuff. That's true. You can't. I'm not saying we should choose our actions in anticipation of like what they're gonna do and try to prevent them from doing that. I'm not saying that. Like, just that's not a factor. But there's a lot of other people in the country besides just the Republican Party base. You do have and this number is growing, about 40% of the country right now are registered independents. They have leans, like there's like, most of them have partisan leans. So like, percentage of them are going to be Republican leaning independents, and a percentage of them are going to be Democratic leaning independents. If you do what you suggest, if Biden did what you suggest, and instruct DOJ to look into Donald Trump and to investigate him and prosecute him or whatever, forget the Republican base. That doesn't matter. You will lose like a very decent chunk of the center, and you will lose some Democrats at the same. Like it's not, you know, 5, 7, 8% of Democrats are going to be disgusted with that kind of. I mean, I would have been disgusted by that. I would have still continued to vote Democrat, but I would have been really disappointed if I would have seen that.
You
So I
wouldn't have
guess
tried
like
to defend them on it in the sense that like there's a problem here. There's an insurrectionist trying to run for presidency and he's not getting dealt with legally, and the DOJ is not fulfilling its function, at least in terms of serving the republic, right? Like it's a very key part of it, isn't it? No, you wouldn't try to defend that decision, or
I guess what I'm trying to get at is obviously my calculation is I think that had he done what you suggested, it would have made the situation even worse. That's what I think.
okay,
I think
that's the pragmatic argument rather than the principled argument. So
yeah.
because to me, but I'm just saying. So it sounds like, just to be sure, we agree with the principled argument, because the way I see it is that something is being violated one way or the other. On one end, Biden is getting involved with the DOJ and getting them to expedite their the charges against Trump.
Yeah.
But then the other violation is that an insurrectionist is getting allowed to run for presidency without it being legally resolved exactly what he did, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
to me, I see that as like, well, I'd rather the violation but you seem to agree with that in principle. You're just not sure about the outcomes.
I would be willing to compromise my principles in a situation like this if I felt confident that doing it wouldn't provoke a worse outcome. So I do believe that it's a good principle to have an independent DOJ, and I think that we should fight to preserve that. Like, if one party is going to lose their fucking rocker, you do need to have, in a two-party system, one of these parties needs to be fighting for the system, which sounds super cringe and too lived out. And I want to be clear again, I'm not talking about a dogmatic adherence to principles and norms. Mm-hmm. I would be willing to bend. It's just a simple harm reduction calculation at the end of the day for all of these things. And in my mind, this sort of proposal has significant risk. Like, I think it would, I don't even think in my mind, it's not a risk. It's a certainty that if Biden would have done this, he would have sunk his entire presidency. He would have sunk his entire legislative agenda. We would have been absolutely massacred in the midterms. I think you would have made a martyr out of Donald Trump. And so, you know, maybe he's in prison, maybe not. But by the time we get to 2024, then you have like President Vance winning all the battleground states plus, you know, Minnesota and New Jersey.
I'm
and
very
you know,
certain of that.
Yeah.
Do you believe this, and this happens even if it results in Trump getting convicted for the fake electoral scheme?
Yeah, I do. I really do. Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. What do you mean?
I just don't know how you can predict that. With what I'm seeing right now, and with the discussions that I hear between Americans, even if they're on the Democratic side, I feel like most Americans don't fucking know how any of these systems work. Like, it should be a massive fucking world ender that Trump is going on Truth Social, telling the DOJ who to go after, but it just doesn't seem like people care all that much. So why would it be different with? Why
don't we talk about like the actual hypothetical here? Like, so you would be on board with Newsom? Hypothetical Newsom, say he wins, and then, you know, it's January 20th, 2029, and he announces day one that he's going to instruct Attorney General Jack Smith to investigate the previous administration. Like, you can't think of any pragmatic arguments against doing something like that?
Oh, I can hear the pragmatic arguments against it. I think they're outweighed by the pragmatic arguments in the other direction. I think, or like the arguments against not doing it, because something is missing right now. There's like a missing piece in the American system where doing things properly is not, or doing things normally is not answering it. So maybe that solution in particular, and again, I don't know the legal theory or the American system well enough to know like if there are better alternatives, but something different and something uncomfortable needs to happen is like the more broad prescription I'm making. It seems like you're okay with that principle, but you just don't seem to know, you don't seem to have heard an example that's convincing to you. Is that right?
I haven't heard an example that I think mitigates the kind of significant risk that I'm talking about. And I have an alternative proposal that I think is better, that doesn't have the risk. And it affects it, you end up at the same outcome. My whole thing this entire time is, you know, Newsom can run in 2028 on a platform of accountability for corruption in government. You just keep that shit nice and general so that you don't signal to voters that you want to wield DOJ as a personal instrument of the Democratic Party. But you can say, no one is above the law. I want my, if you elect me president, I pledge to nominate a candidate that will aggressively pursue government corruption at any level of government. And, as he's picking his attorneys general candidates or whatever, he can ask them more general questions. Like, you can get at the same outcome without any of the baggage. Like, the American president, usually what happens is the voters will give a party a trifecta for 2 years and then they take it away. It's pretty predictable. This is a really difficult law of political gravity to, overpower. George W. Bush did in 2002, but that was after September 11th. And so, Democrats were, they didn't want to be seen as like counteracting the president after such a horrific terrorist attack. But apart from that, you get 2 years. And so I want my President Newsom focused on reforming the government while he has those 2 years. So I want him to hit the ground running, a slew of executive orders. I want him to aggressively work with Congress to get as much legislation done. I want him to pressure the Senate to get rid of the filibuster. And I want him squarely focused on that. If you introduce this new element of now he is directing DOJ to do stuff, you are now jeopardizing all of that. And it's so needless. You don't have to do that. Literally just nominate Jack Smith and just let him go. Like, Jack Smith is a fucking bulldog. Mm-hmm. He will go after these things. And so you can affect the same outcome with none of the risk that you guys don't seem to. I don't mean to be rude. The people that argue on the other side of this argument, they just don't seem to acknowledge the risks. They think that, I don't know, they delusionally convince themselves that the public is going to get behind the Democrats, which I don't know why they would assume that. I don't know. After everything we've seen, the public reelected Donald Trump and gave him a popular vote victory after January 6th, after he was convicted of 34 felony counts. And so I don't understand the confidence that people have that the public is going to get behind this. That's just not, they don't know American voters, I guess, like I know. I mean, American voters will let you down. They are a massive contradiction. They're oftentimes completely incoherent. You have no idea what their actual ideological principles are. And they are susceptible to propaganda. And once Fox News and the Republican media apparatus, who do have an advantage on us, and I'll finish up and let you jump in. Once they jump on this and start pounding the Newsom administration 24/7, it will be disastrous for the party. It will hurt his ability to get stuff done with the Congress. It will sink his presidency and will doom him to being a one-term president. That will 1000% happen. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, so to me that doesn't sound like so that's like not really a norm busting solution then. This is also just like the argument that if Biden had nominated someone other than Garland, you could have got the same result.
Yeah.
In the last
that was the mistake.
cycle.
Yeah, that was the mistake. Okay. Not, the mistake was not him declining to instruct Garland to do stuff. The mistake was him nominating Garland.
Okay. I think you can probably say that there was still the mistake lacking in like after Garland's been chosen, because from where I stand, I don't think any attorney general should ever be like having this issue. But again, like it should be the norm to make sure things like Trump 2 don't happen. That should be the norm. But
that's not really, that's not really up for that's not the president's job, though, is my point. The president's job is not to squash political opposition, even if it's valid reasons. That's just not what they're there to, that's not what they're there to do, Yeah,
but it's maybe not. But when you're in a situation when, like, assuming that so your position is basically that Jack Smith in 2028 or whatever will hypothetically be able to just he'd be the one to actually finish these cases against Trump and probably against other people in his administration or other people in his inner circle who were helping out, like the likes of Eastman and Giuliani and all these other.
Those cases are fucking those cases are fucking dead. So like whatever,
they're dead.
Yeah, they're dead. There's no chance of those cases coming back as far as as far as I understand. Chat, I'm pretty sure those cases are settled. Like as soon as he became president, the DOJ has a longstanding policy of not indicting presidents, and so literally the day after I think it was the day after, it was very shortly after the election, Jack Smith announced that they were, ending those cases, and the statute of limitations are probably going to lapse by the time he leaves. But on top of that, Donald Trump is very, very, very likely to blanket pardon his entire cabinet, minus people who pissed him off, and himself when he's on the way out the door in 2029. And so I don't know I don't know what options Jack Smith is going to have, but you can still have state level prosecutors who, if they find crimes, they can prosecute him, like we saw in New York and Georgia.
Interesting. I don't know. The way I see it, that just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like it's enough. It feels like a lot of people are being allowed to get away with shit. And I don't know if that's really going to stop the issue of Republicans like trying again later.
It's not. I mean, you can't. It's not,
because it sounds like as it is. It sounds like as it is right now, there just isn't that much a president can do unless they eventually get 2/3 of Congress.
I mean, you can violate the norm. Like Donald Trump violated the norm. He issued, a couple different executive orders instructing DOJ to investigate his political rivals. But my whole thing that I've been saying recently is like, well, look at how that's working out for him. It is not working out for him. Those cases are being laughed out of court. Grand juries are laughing them out of court. Jeanine Pirro,
for very different reasons, correct? Right?
Yeah, because there's no
merit.
There's no merit. Yeah, but like, but yeah, but him doing that, Donald Trump doing that, has not helped his presidency. It's not benefited him in any kind of way. The public has like really turned on Trump in a way that even surpasses what happened during the first term. Like he is drifting now lower into like the mid 30s, and it's like death by 1,000 cuts. It's like, it's the ICE stuff, it's the economy, it's the tariffs, it's the corruption, it's all of it. Like he's just not, he is like petering out. He's like withering on the vine at the same time he's physically diminishing. And so the whole presidency is just so fucking pathetic.
But the thing is, Trump has tried to go after people who he didn't really have anything on, right? He tried to go after like tax filings and mortgage shit or whatever with was it John Bolton and who else? Was it Jack Smith was the other one he went after?
I don't think he went after Jack Smith.
In that case, or
did he go after Jack Smith? I don't think so.
I can't remember because I thought there was 3 people. I know one was John Bolton, right?
It was Letitia James, James Comey, and Bolton. Right, yeah. Bolton, they actually...
Comey was what I was thinking. Okay, yeah. Yeah, but like imagine, do you think that would be the same if, like, how do you think MAGA would be, or how do you think even some independents would be if Trump had done that and he had actually found someone who had been guilty of something quite horrible? Like,
well,
I think the victory laps would be fucking all over the place. They'd be so vindicated by that in their own spheres, and they would pass that confidence on to the rest of the public when they're talking to them.
Wait, hold on. I want to jump in. Would you acknowledge that what I proposed just carries none of the risk that I'm talking about? Yeah,
it does. Yeah, like, so assuming that they go through it in the way that you're saying they do, then yeah, I could easily say that the argument was just not appoint Garland, and if Newsom did it, I would rather he did it by appointing. If he can achieve all the same outcomes or pretty much the same outcomes without breaking a norm, then obviously I prefer that.
I'm saying he can. I'm saying he can.
Okay.
He can do that. You can have private conversations. You can have, when you're interviewing your candidates, you do have to be a little bit careful because, those candidates are going to be, they're going to give testimony on the Senate floor, and, the Republicans are going to ask him, did you have any conversations about this? That's what happens every single time there's these kinds of confirmations, but you can get there with dog whistles and winks, and there's clever ways to kind of get around that. And I fully support it. Like, I do think that hypothetical President Newsom, when he's interviewing candidates to be AG, I think he should probe them in a way that sort of avoids any kind of like problems, and pick someone who he feels confident will go after the previous administration. I fully support that. But the way that I'm hearing you propose and Destiny propose and my Live and Learn guest propose, they want like explicit. They want him to campaign on, we are going to investigate the previous administration. And there's problems with that too, by the way. There's no evidence. There's other pragmatic reasons for being against this. There's no evidence that this is a successful electoral strategy. That's not how Democrats have had successful election cycles in the era of Trump. Sorry, go
on.
Well, it's just a really quick point, but like, out of 5 election cycles during the Trump era, 2016, 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024, Democrats have had 3 winning election cycles, 2018, 2020, and 2022. And all 3 cycles, they were not running on like Trump bad stuff. They were way more focused on, in 2018, it was about protecting healthcare. In 2020, there was some Trump bad stuff, but it was more a general kind of like return to normalcy, like return the like competent rollout of the vaccine, these kinds of things. In fact, like the most Trump bad election that campaign that we saw was from Kamala. She was doing way more Trump bad than any of the previous election cycles, and she lost. And so like, I don't understand why my liberal compatriots, or I thought were liberal, think that this is something that voters want to hear. They don't. Voters don't want to hear like hyper partisan attacks in this kind of way.
It depends on when, though, right? Like in 2022, in the midterms, if I remember correctly, the polls there showed that for voters, the top issues, I think, were just under inflation. You had, what was it? Democracy, wasn't it? Like securing or like upholding democracy. That was a big issue, like because that was obviously, it wasn't that far off of, I think it was in Pew. It seemed like it was a top issue just under inflation. And obviously that would have been, again, like another good time to propose something a bit more radical, because again, that's like, that's when January 6th was still fresh in people's memories, right? Now it might be harder.
You got to be careful with that. So first of all, I think the second most important issue was reproductive rights, because the Supreme Court had just ended Roe v. Wade like a few months before the midterms. But you got to be careful with the 30% of Americans think that this election is about protecting democracy, because a good chunk of those people that are answering that question are right wingers who think that voter fraud by illegal immigrants.
I thought okay, maybe I have to find the poll, but I'm pretty sure it was one of those things where it was a majority of Democrats who were saying this, because they split it up into like red and blue on Pew. I can just find it. Top issues, voters.
No, but the question. I'm sure that was important for Democrats, but the question is, what were the most salient, important issues for independent voters? Like that's the bigger question. That's the bigger consideration.
Okay, so this didn't say independent voters. This just said like economy. It was like top, and then second was future of democracy, and it was like 80% Democrat and 70 Republican. So okay, to make it that way.
So a decent chunk of those people were like, their idea of the threat to democracy right now is they think that literally millions of illegal immigrants are voting in elections. But if you look in poll after poll after poll. And this is something I'm about to tell you, something that does not map to online political discourse at all. But the vast majority of Americans, when you ask them, want the parties to start working together again. They don't want the partisan bickering, which again, that is like, if you glance at Twitter every day, you would not think that. But this is not true. I mean, this has been something that has been the case for years. This is why I think you're seeing candidates like Talarico in Texas. Are you familiar with him?
No, but is this independents who are saying this, or just everyone?
It's everyone, but especially independents.
Okay.
It's everyone, but it's especially independents. But Talarico is he's this really interesting Texas Senate candidate out of Texas right now, but he's running on a platform that is explicitly avoiding partisanship. So he's saying it's not about Democrat. He's a Democrat, but he's like, it's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about, keeping your eyes up at the oligarchs and the billionaires. It's kind of like a soft Christian liberal populism. But that's because he's speaking to a significant portion of the electorate that they want to move past the partisan bickering.
Yeah, that just seems like a hard thing to do. But obviously the solution to that is like, I wouldn't even say 99. It's like 100% of the work to achieve that needs to come from the Republican side. Like that's where, like, all the reform and all the change needs to come from them. Democrats are not the reason that's a problem.
Oh no, I agree. I agree. But
but then the question is like how you, because again, like going back to the practicalities, I don't really care how it's done. I just think it needs to, if there is a nice norm inclusive way to do it, then fine. It's just that for somewhere, like the way that the American system works, like it failed up until 2024, and it's going to fail again if there isn't like substantial justice done on the people who tried to coup the government and who fucked around with the time that they were in office as well, like under this presidency. And like I'm saying hypothetically, like if the norms don't achieve that, like if that outcome that you're saying doesn't happen, let's say Jack Smith does get appointed, but there are whatever other obstacles in the DOJ because they want to appear non-partisan or whatever the fuck else, then that's a problem that I would be completely for the executive getting involved in. Like, would you feel the same way if Jack Smith gets appointed at the DOJ and then for some reason, like maybe because of the staffers there or because of like maybe he's feeling pressure to not look non-partisan, that he ends up going too slow? Would you want the executive to get involved then, or?
Maybe, maybe. It is tough for me. Like it's tough for me to get there, but I mean, I can't. I'll put it this way: like I can imagine the situation getting so extreme and the urgency reaching such a critical level that I could get behind something like that. But that is
Does it become a maybe for Garland as well then with Biden?
Well, in the case of Biden, again, I think that if he would have fired Garland, who was at the time, apart from dragging his feet on Trump, Garland was a very professional, very solid attorney general. And if Biden would have like fired Garland, everybody would have known that it was because he wasn't moving fast enough on Trump. And that would have significantly damaged Biden. It would have effectively terminated his entire legislative agenda. It would have led to really bad performance in the midterms instead of like picking up a Senate and running the board against Trump's crazy candidates that he was pushing for. And I think it would have resulted in either Vance or Trump or whoever the nominee for the Republican Party. It would have resulted, I think, in a pretty convincing mandate for them. So, Biden was not like a very popular president. Obviously, he hovered around 41-42% in the aggregate for most of his term. But even with that, which is not a horrible, I guess not a terrible rating, but despite that, he was still able to get so much done in Congress, and he was still able to do a lot of stuff as president that I think was really good policy that helped people. And all of that is like severely imperiled if you mire your administration in the kind of controversy that would have come with something like this. I mean, I get what you're saying in terms of like there's an urgency here. Like I agree. If this administration, if nobody faces any kind of like legal accountability for the things that they're doing, then there's so much incentive for the next Republican to just do the same shit. And that is obviously not tenable. And so to the extent that I would be willing to compromise my principles to address that, it's a case by case. It's just in this particular case, I think your argument is kind of weak in the face of the risks and the alternatives that I think are better.
Okay. But again, with this specific hypothetical was about like, even if a Jack Smith DOJ still, for whatever reason, struggles to achieve the same, to achieve the outcome the same way that the Garland one did, or even close to it, then it seems like you were giving a maybe for the executive getting involved, but that also carries the same risks, right? So whether it's Garland or Jack Smith, like if there's a problem even like with limits of the DOJ itself, because obviously the DOJ is like it's a whole collection of people with different roles and agencies, but that's the only thing I'm maybe struggling with, because again, like I'm happy to go with the normal way. It's just that if the normal way is not working, then the risks go both ways to me. I don't know how much you know about like what they did with Brazil, because you know how like Bolsonaro tried to coup the government in
Yeah, yeah,
2022 when he lost, and then he got fucking booted out.
yeah, yeah.
So what they, and again, I've only looked at this recently, but what they seem to do is that well, first of all, their Supreme Court is just quite different from the United States one, right? Like their Supreme Court can actually be the ones that launch investigations. They can invest. They can do quite a few things that they have more of like a closer to a DOJ role almost than
Wait,
what they can do.
did you say that the courts can initiate investigations in Brazil?
The Supreme Court, I think they can. Yeah,
What the fuck?
is that not right?
That's an interesting system. Okay.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of what they do is similar to maybe what I think the DOJ should have been doing, because they also have like a fake news inquiry where they could investigate like people who were engaging in slander and like fake stories and specifically threatening the court itself. But basically, like in 2019, they oversaw a whole bunch of they went through this kind of overhaul against disinformation and things like that, and it resulted in something like court decisions becoming expedited a lot quicker. So it used to be like a third of cases were ruled on in a single year, but then the year after it was like 2/3 or 70%. And they were also basically they allowed themselves to order like the removal of disinformation around elections, like the Supreme Court did this. And then obviously they finally ruled against Bolsonaro because he abused his power for corruption, protecting his son, whatever else, and also for manipulating media coverage around the election. So he's basically banned from office until 2030.
Nice.
And other people in his administration as well are banned. But it seems like to get an equivalent of that in America would require some kind of like change to the DOJ to make the DOJ more proactive in terms of protecting democracy. Because the problem I see is that the president getting involved with the DOJ looks bad because you can't make it look nonpartisan. But the problem there as well is that like if one side is anti-democracy, then everything that you do to defend democracy will look partisan, right? Even if the DOJ unilaterally or like without any pressure from the president decides to go and pursue like defensive democracy, it's going to look partisan because the only people to go after will be Republicans, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Okay. The other case that you went over with Josiah, I guess, because I was curious to get your thoughts on this, was like he was talking about the FCC going after Fox because of the Dominion scandal. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see this the same way? Like it's just not the FCC's job? Like they're generally supposed to be laissez-faire when it comes to free speech, and like why would they start investigating Fox because after the civil suit? Or
so our investigative agencies so the FEC is a regulatory agency, so I don't think they would be under the DOJ, right?
No.
But our agencies are supposed to be like free from any kind of political influence. And so there's two different hypotheticals that we're talking about here. There's one hypothetical where through the Dominion lawsuit and information that became public during that process, and maybe the FCC gets like anonymous phone call giving them a tip about some kind of like impropriety or illegality on the part of Fox. In that situation, if the FCC opens an investigation, that's great. That's how the agency is supposed to operate anyways. But I felt like what Josiah was saying, without fully committing to it in a way that like Rashad did, I felt like he was coming at it more from, let's just decide to arbitrarily open an investigation into Fox News in search of a crime because we disapprove of them being a propaganda arm for Trump. And at that point, then it becomes a partisan investigation. Then it becomes a politically motivated investigation. You arrive at a conclusion. Fox News is a propaganda arm of the MAGA movement, and they've done a tremendous amount of harm to the country or whatever. And they need to go to jail or be shut down or whatever. You start from that, and then you like go searching for crimes to try to affect that outcome. That would be a like a corrupt application of like the law or regulations, or these kinds of things. But again, if they find probable cause to investigate Fox, like through some means or another, then that's completely appropriate, obviously, to investigate any crime and proceed with charges if necessary, make referrals to the DOJ or sue them or whatever. Yeah.
And maybe you know more of this than I do, but I guess the fact that they were already in that lawsuit with Dominion, that it got settled because it was a civil case, right? Like it wasn't like a...
Yeah, they settled.
Is that
they
not,
settled. Yeah.
Do you not still have to, I don't know how it works with like breaking laws or like you still have to effectively like, it's still breaking a law, right? If you do defamation, like that's like what it comes under, the umbrella.
I don't think so.
Or
is it technically against the law to defame someone? I don't
know the difference between like crimes and laws when it comes to like civil versus
I
criminal.
don't. Well,
the point I'm more getting at is that like again you have again I see like another issue where you've got Fox News, which is like a massive, I think it's still the most watched media organization in America, isn't it, for news? Is it still the biggest one?
It should be. It's been that way for a while, but they have competition now that they didn't have before, like Newsmax and OANN, so maybe not, but yeah.
Yeah, there's still an issue there that they just get to kind of settle their way out of the settlement with Dominion, but then with everything else, they just get to carry on business as usual? Like...
Well, I just looked it up here, and defamation is not a crime in most of the United States, but it is generally against the law.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, it's against the law, but it's not a crime. Yeah.
In the civil sense. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Sorry, what was your question?
My question was more like whether or not that's a reason to go after them, like whether like for the DOJ to go after them in the sense that they've already done this, like they've already or there's already there's already a good reason to believe that they have broken laws. In terms of the discovery from
so I don't know for sure because I don't know like entirely what DOJ protocol is, but I would assume that would not be within the purview of like something that DOJ would go after. Like that would be something that the FCC would maybe explore, and if they were violating some kind of regulation or something like that, they could be sanctioned or fined or these kinds of things. But I don't think that DOJ would get involved until it escalated unless it escalated into like a bigger crime. Like if they found like Fox News was like bribing politicians, that's when DOJ I think would get involved. But anything short of those kinds of crimes, then it would be a break from precedent, and you would be it would be seen obviously as like politicizing the DOJ.
Yeah. So, but it sounds like this dispute was more to do with the FCC, right?
The dispute between Dominion and Fox?
Between you and Josiah.
Sorry, ask the question again?
It sounded like the dispute that you had with Josiah was about whether or not the FCC should have gone in on Fox News because of the Dominion stuff.
Yeah, so the dispute was that I think Josiah said something along the lines of, I can imagine a world where the FCC saw some kind of evidence of a crime and then looked into them, but he didn't cite what statute he thought Fox News was violating. He didn't cite any particular kind of crime. And to me, that indicates that the person's psychology is they're thinking about it in terms of the outcome first and then the investigation second. So the outcome would be like maybe take Fox News off the air or, like sue them into oblivion and then you kind of work backwards and you're like, okay, let me see if I can find a crime. Like obviously if the FCC or DOJ discovered any evidence of a crime for Fox News or any other company or any individual, then that is their mandate to, then you go to a judge and you get a warrant to like look through their emails or go through their house or whatever. That's the legal constitutional process that we have in this country. And any kind of break from that for partisan reasons carries significant risk in a way that disproportionately affects Democrats. So that, like, to your point earlier, there is a fucking double standard here because Donald Trump is blatantly weaponizing all of these agencies, the IRS, the FEC, the FCC, the DOJ. Like, he's blatantly corruptly weaponizing these agencies to go after his rivals, and it's unclear the extent of the political price he pays for that. But are you familiar with the thing that happened on Obama's watch where there were these conservative nonprofits that were audited by the IRS?
No.
Okay. Well, there was the IRS. You know what the IRS is, right?
Yeah.
They started to audit and go after a bunch of nonprofits during Obama's watch. 1/3 of all the nonprofits that they went after were progressive aligned groups, liberal aligned groups, Democratic Party aligned groups. You have to be kind of careful when you're nonprofit in terms of like partisan stuff, and then about 2/3 of them, I think, were conservative, religious, Christian kind of groups. And this was a thing that they turned into a quote unquote scandal in like Republican media for years. They still talk about it to this day. I mean, if you go on Twitter right now and search IRS Obama, you could probably find like several tweets today of people still talking about it. And of course, like they're going to do what they do. Obviously, like the Republican Party, they're going to make a mountain out of a molehill. They are going to try to manufacture every controversy that they could come up with. But that doesn't mean that you should make it easy for them. Like you make their job of convincing voters in the middle, which is what they're really trying to do at the end of the day. You make that easier when you just do the things that, you know, they're accusing you of doing. And so I think you just shouldn't do those things. Let me ask you something. I want to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So we both agree that there are very serious structural and systemic problems in the United States. Like I think that's what we're talking about. You're mentioning the fact that Donald Trump was even able to run again. Compare that with like Brazil or South Korea. Structural imbalances with the Senate and the filibuster and the Electoral College, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think has a better chance of actually addressing these problems, maybe fixing these problems, building a big enough coalition to forge a big enough consensus to actually pass reforms, or aggressively / unethically / potentially illegally, if you're Rashad, going after the Republican Party and MAGA? Like which of those things do you think stands a better chance of actually
if you're talking about like election campaigning, is that what you mean? Like messaging?
No, I mean no, beyond messaging. I mean, like, you know, doing things that would like violate norms and maybe violate laws, and you know, there's like a spectrum of
like what they do hypothetically if they're in office in 2028, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Would you yeah, go ahead.
So to me, this all depends on like how because it seems like you've got you're almost making it sound like maybe almost like it solved the problem. It's just appoint Jack Smith to the DOJ and he'll deal with all the anti-democracy shit, right? Or at least in terms of Trump, which would be most of the battle. But I'm kind of coming from a place where like assuming this doesn't work, or assuming something like the Supreme Court comes in and they say, oh, by the way, these were official acts and you can't get prosecuted for them anyway, or convicted.
I just want to say
things like this interfering here, yeah.
I just want to say that I love pondering politics. He's my boy, and I love pondering politics. He's in my chat right now.
Yeah, so this is all assuming that these kind of like proper ways that you're proposing don't actually work, and there are still other like significant institutional barriers to like actually achieving some kind of accountability from the Republican Party. At that point, then I do actually think breaking norms to go after the culprits is probably more important, because otherwise you're going to have this again. You might still have a 50-50 Senate and the filibuster and everything, or whatever else, and Democrats just trying to play ball with an opposition that just doesn't even believe in the system anymore. That can go on forever, right? Like that. Yeah, I don't want to be like just kicking the can down the road with that situation.
Then I guess
like, how would you feel about that? How would you feel about if Jack Smith gets his charges against Trump and Trump gets convicted and everything, but then the Supreme Court steps in and says, sorry, these were actually official acts. Whoops.
Well, at that point, it really depends on what else is going on in the country, I guess. But like at that point, then it becomes about even bigger reforms, even more compromising of like liberal principles. Because I mean, even then you would have, there's technically a remedy and provided for in the Constitution to, you know, handle these kinds of things. You can have the Congress pass legislation to expand the court. You can adopt a binding code of ethics for the Supreme Court and initiate term limits. You can pack the court. You can impeach judges. If you
this is a lot of this is more than a this is all of this is like more than a 50-50 split in the Congress, right? With wild cards and everything, or
more than a 50-50 split? What do you mean? I'm sorry.
well, no, as in like this isn't this assuming more than like let's say they have a 50-50 split in the Senate and they can't pass these kind of things through the Congress.
Well, at that point, you have to, again, it really just depends on what else is going on in the country, but like I guess
Would you divide the court?
That would have to be like so once you just defy the court and, you know, keep someone in prison, for example, it's not hyperbole to say that at that point we are just talking about civil war. The Republican movement in this country, the MAGA movement in this country, are very well armed. They have guns. They have weapons. They will train. We have various right-wing militias. And, you know, I don't know what this civil war would look like. Would it look like the Alex Garland movie, or would it look like something like much, much bigger than that? But this idea that the Democrats can just, you know, defy a Supreme Court order in that kind of way, that would kick off a significant escalation in this country that would inevitably end up with civil war. I think like people accuse me of hyperbole when I talk about that kind of thing, but that would happen. I don't know what to tell you guys, but the Republicans would never, just like, yeah, go ahead.
How has Trump responded to the tariffs to the court?
My understanding is that it was a similar situation to like Biden and the student loan debt. So they invoked a particular kind of emergency power for their rationale for Trump's tariffs to start off the administration, and now I think they're exploring a kind of different legal rationale. But to be clear, I'm not up to the particulars on that case. But my understanding is that he is not like just like simply ignoring their ruling. They're going with like a different legal argument.
So what are the tariffs? Are they gone then, or is it? As far as I can tell, they've said that they were unconstitutional, but they're still there, aren't they? In a lot of the cases.
I gotta be honest with you. I don't know what.
He basically gave a speech saying that the Supreme Court was full of shit, right?
No, but he wasn't saying I'm going to ignore this particular order. He said we're going to use a different mechanism to keep the tariffs in place.
Okay.
Which is something that presidents can do. I mean, you acknowledge that that's what Biden did with the student loan debt, right?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing there.
Right. Why is defying the Supreme Court on like an insurrectionist going to jail or not? Why is defying the Supreme Court on that only Civil War territory?
You would agree that there's like a spectrum of risk of escalation to civil war when we explore hypothetical examples of presidents ignoring the Supreme Court. Like, you can imagine that there would be maybe one decision that the Supreme Court could come down that the president would ignore that would not carry the same risk as something else.
There's a risk of saying you can try to coup the government and still be president and not even get in trouble after you've lost your seat.
I know. Yeah, but I understand that. But you understand my question, like
yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So if Jack Smith, hypothetical Jack Smith prosecutes Donald Trump in President Newsom's term, and then they secure a conviction and he goes to prison, it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, this is bullshit, you got to let him out, and they just ignore that order, that would kick off intense political violence in this country. Yes. Just very predictably. I don't know how anybody could make the argument that that would not happen.
I don't know like how far this would necessarily have to go. Like a Republican militia is going to start coming out into the streets and Trump directs them from jail like a fucking dark Mandela. I don't really know how far that would have to go. They might also just be like demoralized, and they might also just think that I don't know how many of them would even. I guess they'd start making the argument that definitely you shouldn't go back against the court, but I don't know how many of them know or care about that in terms of the Constitution.
I mean,
they care because it's happening to Trump.
Would you agree that if you divide a Supreme Court order in that particular kind of way, then at that point we are just tossing the Constitution, right? And would that be would that be the last time that President Newsom defied the Constitution? I mean, like, it starts with that, but would it really end there? Because if you're ignoring the Supreme Court, what's to stop him from ignoring the Congress the next time? Or what's to stop him from ignoring the next election? Or, you know, like, once you do that, that's one of the most significant ways that you could just defy the Constitution, is to ignore the court.
Wait, so since you mentioned ignoring the Supreme Court or Civil War, what's your position on Lincoln going against the Supreme Court during the Civil War?
Well, that was during a war, right?
But was it correct to do? Or
Probably, yeah.
Okay, so.
But wait, hang on. That was
He
during
didn't throw the Constitution, did he?
Well, kind of. At that point, he, you know, ignored the Constitution in that instance. But that was during a civil war. I mean, you would acknowledge.
Yeah, but that's why I'm asking you why it has to only be a civil war where you can do that. And because to me, like, there's civil war might be one example of when you can do it, but another example might be a guy who tried to coup the government is just getting away with it, and he's already been president again after trying to coup the government, and now he's not even going to get in trouble for it legally.
Well, that's why I asked you the question of what do you think would be more likely to succeed if the goal is trying to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future. I mean, like Trump and trying to do a coup, and, you know, January 6th and all the corruption. Like, what would stand a better chance of actually fixing that in the long run? Would it be like actually implementing reforms, passing bills, potentially doing constitutional amendments?
Of course, I'm always going to be in favor of adding in more safeguards. Like, for example, when they strengthened the ECA, that was a good thing to do, right? I think there should be more safeguards involved when it comes to the Electoral Count Act, with disinformation should be probably a thing as well. Mm-hmm. There should be things in place for. I don't know how maybe even constitutional amendments, because I don't know how they can say, like, well, insurrection and rebellion's one thing, but like attempting a coup effectively isn't. So maybe new laws for that.
Right. But all of these things require political capital. And I don't know, if you had to guess what the polling is on how Americans feel about a president potentially defying the Supreme Court, what would you guess those numbers are?
Probably quite low.
They're very, 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 very low. It's like 90+% of the country are very opposed to presidents ignoring the Supreme Court. And so if you're going to take all these actions, number one, like, you are risking like massive political violence all over the country. And if it doesn't take the form, it's not going to look like the Civil War in 1862 or whatever, where we're meeting in fields. It's going to be like guerrilla warfare and like terrorist violence, and it would be unimaginably bloody and deadly and violent and protracted, and it would just be the worst thing ever. And it would completely crush our economy. It would boost our adversaries on the world stage. And so I think it's a good thing to not take the prospect of civil war lightly, and to do whatever you can possibly do to prevent that from happening. And so if it gives you a little bit of insight into how my mind works, that's one of the things that really motivates me, because I don't think that a civil war is completely impossible in this country. I'm not where Tim Pool is, where he's like calling for it every day, but it's not impossible. I mean, we could have did you see Civil War, by the way, the Alex Garland movie?
No. What's that?
Bro, you should watch it, man. It's really good. It came out in 2023, and it's just a pretty straightforward movie about like what would a civil war look like in the United States, and it's pretty fucking realistic when I watch that movie. But I think that I think that if you acknowledge that these reforms, like passing legislation or really adopting meaningful reforms, you cited some before that like help these kinds of things. We did a lot of reforms after Nixon, for example, to prevent outward corruption from the executive branch, and that's actually one of the norms that we're talking about potentially breaking here, about like this like the independent nature of the DOJ. But if you agree that those are better than, circumventing the Supreme Court, or, taking extremely illiberal measures, ignoring the Supreme Court, then I don't know why you wouldn't favor my prescription of doing these things and pursuing these reforms in a way that does not advance us towards an outcome that could like really jeopardize everything.
No, I do. It's just that the problem is that I'm just like very strongly anticipating an environment where Republicans still hold enough sway that they can just not let most of these things happen. And I'm trying to say like I'm trying to get to the principle of like how you would feel if Republicans are just in that position where they are basically using American democracy to stop it from strengthening itself from within. Like so, an example, like you would say that like so in a way, like going against the Supreme Court would be illiberal, but also the Supreme Court just like deciding that Trump, who tried to coup the government, can't even go to jail for it. That's to me, that's illiberal.
It is.
So at that point, yeah, so it's like if the
I
Supreme
agree.
Court's being illiberal, then why do we still respect them at that point? And wouldn't that also be
Well,
a big argument on this on the even the world stage? Like, so they're not even disagreeing that what Trump did would have been a crime had it not been had he not been president. They're just saying the president was like allowed to commit these crimes. Like that, then the Supreme Court's like that should be there should be a strong a really strong case against the way the Supreme Court's behaving in that situation.
of course, yeah. That's why you hear constant conversation on the Democratic side of the aisle about pursuing court reforms, like passing bills and, building enough political capital to actually take action. And I mean, to your question is like, how do you know that, in 2028 that the Republicans aren't going to be able to block a lot of these reforms? I don't know. Obviously I don't know, but at that point you're just making the case that I don't know if you heard any of the conversation I had with food shops yesterday, but
No, food shops.
she
No, I haven't heard it. Yeah.
she was basically saying like, one of the flaws of liberal democracy is that you can't just like do stuff at the end of the day, is basically what she was saying. And she's right. If we were a country that more resembled China or Russia, they could just get rid of, their problematic politicians rather easily. They don't need to do the work of actually building a kind of consensus. But that's, to me, at this point, you're just making the case to, abandon the liberal like principle of American democracy. I mean, like at that point, it's like, we may as well talk about, doomsday prepping and taking martial arts classes and buying firearms and, equipping yourself for the coming battle, right? Let's just play the tape out.
Not necessarily. No, I think the problem is that this all assumes, but you don't even agree with this. Is that would be the case if the American Constitution and the way things are running in America are all like. That is actually like the gold standard for liberal democracy, and not that there are big problems, like big internal and systemic problems with the system itself. And that's why I don't really consider like, but we make these arguments for all kinds of things, right? Like suppressing free speech in certain ways, like whether obviously what happened with Fox News, for example, in America, there are so many liberal democracies that would never happen in, because we have different regulatory standards for the media where like there would be some kind of obstacle in the way stopping you, or at least holding you accountable afterwards, if you just lie about an election and knowingly lie about it because of ratings. Like that's insane. But we don't call these illiberal measures. We don't call like Germany being able to ban political parties illiberal. We call it a different kind of liberalism. We call it a kind of liberalism where we recognize that there are limits to the amount of freedom that people can have.
Yeah.
In a society. So that's why I don't see why like going against the Supreme Court is necessarily like illiberal, because it's also like, it's what do you do with,
Well,
so
I mean,
you're illiberally stopping the institution that's doing an illiberal thing. It's like what?
Well,
Yeah.
defining the Supreme Court is for sure illiberal in a way that is orders of magnitude worse than, say, restricting people's liberty on a smaller scale, like, no jaywalking rules, or you have to go to the speed limit and these kinds of things. Like obviously, so one of the fundamental pillars of liberal democracy is like checks on power, checks on authority, like co-equal branches of government. And which isn't to say that the system right now, this is not me saying, oh, the system is fine, like we can just continue as is. Like you're bringing up completely valid points that how can you have like a functional, healthy democracy when one party is basically just a cult of personality of insane religious zealots and Trump sycophants? Like there's no easy answers to that question, but when you look at the span of American history, this is not the first time that we have been tested in this kind of way. And I would argue that there have been times in the past that we were tested even more like perilously than in this moment right now, which isn't to say that it can't get much worse and like really existential. Like we are on a bad path right now. And so we have to, what we choose to do as a country in the next like 10 to 20 years, I think are really pivotal, maybe the most pivotal time in American history since the fucking Civil War. But if the, black civil rights leaders were committed to the cause of civil rights legislation and ending Jim Crow through the system, if they were committed to that for like a century, like decades of activism, I don't think we have a really good argument for wanting to throw in the towel now after 10 years of Trump. Like,
I wouldn't compare because the civil rights is a bit difficult to compare though, because you're right, they did do a lot of if you're talking like even pre-civil rights movement, like the civil rights movement obviously predates MLK and all those people, like, because the civil rights movement before them was decades of legal action, right? The NAACP, like all they did was fight on legal terms, and they made loads of gains, but obviously none of them really translated into all that much. But at the end of the day, the civil rights movement, they broke laws, right? They broke laws that they deemed to be unjust.
Well, the activists did. I mean, and to the extent that there were politicians who like broke some. I mean, my understanding was like LBJ was perhaps a little corrupt with the way that he was like whipping votes for, civil rights at the time. And again, it's a case by case. I just told you, like, I'm not principally like married to norms. Like,
but you do agree with LBJ whipping votes in a arguably corrupt way to do that, right?
Yeah, and we paid a pretty significant price for that, and I think that price was worth it. Like that was a time where I think that price was definitely worth losing the Southern Dixiecrat coalition, because what we got in exchange for that is equal rights for fucking how many millions of people since then. But there's also a different kind of situation back then, because that version of the American government did not have the kind of norms that we have right now. So I don't even know if he was like violating norms at the time that he was doing these kinds of things. I actually don't know.
It's more just like assuming that he was, right? You can assume that he was.
Yeah.
And I guess, do you feel the same way about Newsom with the redistricting? Because again, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the redistricting was technically the opposite of what you'd want to have in a liberal, in a fair and nonpartisan liberal society. Like, because districting before Prop 50 was independent, right? And you typically want districting to be done by independent bodies, but he brought it back to the state.
Yeah, it was.
Am I getting that right? Yeah.
It was a major cause for liberals in the Democratic Party and progressive. The anti-partisan gerrymandering cause has been a really kind of defining issue for the Democratic Party for fucking decades now. But I fully support what we did in California and what Virginia's about to do and what other Democratic Party run states are going to do with their redistricting. Not only do I think that we need to counteract any gerrymandered seat that the Republican Party nets through their efforts, I think we should actually be ruthless and go above and beyond. Like, I think like they launched this salvo, like Donald Trump picked up the phone and he called Abbott and said, like he called that fucking guy from Georgia. He called Abbott and was like, I need you to find me 5 seats in the Congress for the state of Texas. And so they started this war, and the Democratic Party passed a bill through the House on Biden's watch during his term to ban partisan gerrymandering. And it was blocked by the Republicans in the Senate. And so, we gave them an option to just like not have this be a war. They decided to not do that. And then they launched a salvo at us. And so the principle of unilateral disarmament in this specific context is a suicide pact. And so at that point, yes, we should completely abandon those previous efforts. And now I think we have a moral obligation to ruthlessly gerrymander as much as possible, with the intention of ultimately being at the end of the day, provoking or motivating the Republican Party to be on board with banning it in a bipartisan fashion.
Yeah, even though gerrymandering is technically like the more illiberal thing to do, right?
Super illiberal,
okay.
Super undemocratic.
So,
yes, yeah.
So yeah, it does sound like you're okay with it. Yeah, so like we came to the beginning, it sounds like you're okay with means that do break norms and are technically illiberal in a vacuum. But in terms of how you would apply any of these to make sure that there is accountability and justice for the way the Republicans have behaved in terms of them basically just destroying democracy or any principles of it. It just seems like you haven't found an example of how to do that that you're convinced by. Is that it?
Not the ones that I hear proposed most commonly by people who are, justifiably angry and afraid about how this administration is corrupting this country. And so I think like in that fear and in that anxiety and in that rage, people are proposing things that, number one, they're just not going to happen. I hate to break it to you, but like Newsom and the next Democratic president, whoever it is, they're not going to do this. Like they are going to quote unquote do it the right way. Because it's not tenable politically. I mean, forget about the principle of it. It's just politically, it would be disastrous for the next administration if they did it this way. But yeah, to your point, it's just a case by case. Like in terms of the redistricting, what is the risk of, like, what is the political risk for California doing this or Virginia doing this? Not much that I can see. Like gerrymandering is just not something that American voters think about or talk about very much. It's the ones that are really engaged politically that are talking about that issue. But you walk down the street, even in big cities, and just ask 100 random people how they feel about gerrymandering. It's they might have opinions, but it's not something that like nobody is going to the ballot box in any election thinking about gerrymandering. I'll put it that way. And so there's just not, to me, there was no risk of any kind of like political damage. And in fact, it's actually, I think, politically good for the Democrats to do this because it energizes our base. Like the Democratic voter base right now are asking the Democrats to fight, to show teeth, to, play dirty if need be. And these various governors and state legislatures that are passing these measures to net more seats, they're doing it. Like they're being really aggressive. And that is something that, energizes Democratic voters to show up and vote in the midterms and these kinds of things. The risk of what you're proposing with like Newsom directing DOJ, that's like all risk and just, for me, like very little upside, especially when you can just do it my way and not have that risk.
But we're still going into the whole, it's not just we just do it my way. It's as if it's assuming that your way doesn't work. Obviously, like I still said again, I'll say it again, I prefer going the right way. It's just that I'm just not convinced it's going to be all that promising. But because like the problem I run into is that you hear lots of, I'm quite familiar with quite a few examples in history of how fascism or whatever else, like how these things happen because people didn't do enough. Whether it's like with appeasement against the Nazis or whether it's with the Weimar Republic and how Hitler was able to just get away with murder effectively in the early 20s and he just, he gets out of jail in 9 months and he's just back to doing the same thing again after trying to coup the government. And similar examples, I guess, with like Brazil and Bolsonaro, because obviously they had a dictatorship in the 70s and that they introduced all these new standards that are very militant, very much indicators of militant democracy that have so far done them well. I don't know how many examples there are of like militant democracy measures being applied and it goes the other way. Like it actually enables the fascists or it makes things worse. Like, do you know any or? I know people try to say it for Weimar, but I'm just not convinced by it anymore. I feel like they were too soft, if anything.
I like to study history, but I don't think I'm studied enough to answer that question. I mean, I guess I would approach it from a different angle. I mean, you can find plenty of examples of political parties or political movements usurping power, concentrating power, and then it turning into a fucking dystopian nightmare. And so, like, I'm similarly avoidant of that kind of thing. And to your point about like, how do you, the risk of descending into fascism? There's a couple reasons why I'm still like really bullish on America. Actually, even before I get to that, I'm just curious. I want to hear your thoughts on, like, if you had to put into words what this moment represents for America in like specific detail, like not necessarily compared to the evolution of Germany post World War I until 1933. Like, where do you think, what part of the process do you think we're at in this country right now? Not 2024 November, I mean right now in this moment.
What, in terms of like a trajectory to fascism? or like a
or
like the end times,
despotism, tyranny, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. Yeah.
I think America's unfortunately at that stage that we should have never even had to find out, is that like Weimar comparisons are pretty weak generally, because there's so much more difference than there is similarity. But I do think there isn't. If I was going to draw anything, just because it's the one people know about, is that we're in this situation now where you've got people like Trump and all of his guys who are very, very clearly just illiberal and anti-democracy, and then you've got the more liberal conservatives, like the ones who are more traditionally liberal, who are basically using and aligning with people like Trump because it's convenient to them. And now we're in a situation where just like everyone who's like not Democrat essentially is not a Democrat in the sense of like the party, but they're just anti-democracy. And the unique thing about America is that the population voted for it. Like Trump got what, 49.3 whatever of the popular vote, right?
Yeah.
The most the Nazis ever got in a fair and free election was 37%. So we're already but again, like the Weimar Republic was throughout the entire of the 20s, like it was a democracy without Democrats. Like most people in the Reichstag did not support democracy. Like most parties in the Reichstag didn't support democracy. They didn't support the system. America's in that problem now. And I think America is just in a situation where you might even be beyond the pale with like with Trump winning the popular vote, like the point of no return or whatever. But I don't know. I just feel like America's in a position where its way of doing things the right way seems to have failed. It seems like playing nice has failed, and they're in a position where,
What does it mean to fail?
like, doing things the right way has failed in the sense that Trump should never have been allowed to even run in 2024. He shouldn't have been, like, that shouldn't have happened. But the fact that he did it and got the popular vote is like even more, like, how did that even happen in terms of how popular he became? Is that because of disinformation? Is it because of just maybe he's just representative of what half of America has always been? Because like Fox News, even 15 years ago, was not too different from the way Trump is now in the way that they talk, I would argue. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like a more like succinct way to answer what you're saying. Like, I don't think it's really comparable to any other country or point in history, like cleanly. But I do think there's the general issue now is that something quite drastic needs to change from the Democratic side. It seems, or like from the way that there needs to, like, if Democrats ever get power again, they need to make it like the top priority shouldn't be doing things the right way. They should try that first, obviously, but the priority should be making sure something like this never happens again. I think the things that mainly need to be addressed are criminal activity that just seems to go unprosecuted, and the second one is disinformation. I think these two things need radical changes.
I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, just to be clear, I don't disagree with any of that. I wholeheartedly agree with all of that. So at the end of the day, I think it becomes a different kind of debate, I guess, rather than getting lost in the minutia and the particulars. I think it's a question of, like, here's another question for you. In the context of the Democratic Party addressing these problems in the immediate future to address the immediate threat, how much of an effort should be made to defend our liberal structure and our institutions and our fidelity to the Constitution? Like, how much of an effort should be put on that? And then also, like, why or why not should there be an effort made to prioritize these things?
Interesting. So I got a TTS while you were saying that, so I missed maybe 5 seconds, but that's okay. I think you can tell me if this isn't really answering your question. But I think, fuck me, what was I going to say?
Here, let me put it this way.
Can you just rephrase that question just a bit shorter?
Yeah, let me be more concise about it, okay? Because, like, you know, we could, in extraordinary times, in response to an extraordinary threat, we could toss out the Constitution and just, like, fucking handle shit, right? Like any other authoritarian government in the world. We could do those things, right? But to what extent should the Democrats, in their pursuit of reforming the system so that stuff like Trump running again doesn't happen again, in that pursuit, to what extent should the Democrats make an effort to preserve our liberal structure, to preserve our institutions and our constitution?
So obviously that should come first. I have no issue with that. My problem is that it should be only insofar, and I don't consider this tossing the whole constitution and being authoritarian or whatever. I just consider it, it has to be based on the principles like, did doing things the right way achieve, like, ensure that the guardrails of democracy work? And if the answer to that is no, if doing things the right way didn't get the guy who's guilty of trying to do a coup in prison or disqualified, then there's a problem with the system itself. And that at that point, that's when I think like the rule breaking or the norm busting or whatever is justified. Because at that point, it's going back to circle what I said earlier. At that point, well, both outcomes are essentially illiberal, right? Because it's illiberal that doing things the right way allows anti-democratic forces to just stay strong or to stay emboldened. Does that answer your question, or were you looking for something different?
No, I'm thinking about what you said. I'm just thinking about it. Because I have thoughts. I think there's a I think what I'm getting at here is I think we have different thresholds for when we should break that glass. And then there's a different question of what constitutes breaking glass in the first place. Because some people seem to think that breaking this or that really important norm is like not that important or a big deal. And I disagree on that. But you're saying that your threshold is like the fact that Donald Trump was able to run again and the fact that he won and the fact that he became president. That alone is enough for you to be prepared to, I would argue, like significantly compromise on your liberal principles. And I guess I just have a different.
Again, I don't even consider these. Like, maybe it's just semantic, but I don't consider these liberal principles. America is one of many liberal democracies with its own rules and its own standards. Like it just, yeah. So to me, it's more that like the American liberal system has, it's in itself fucked the liberal principles because the system hasn't solved the problem. Like it hasn't preserved itself in a way.
I don't understand the pushback. Like, so one of the like really fundamentally important pillars of liberalism is these checks on power and co-equal branches of government and these kinds of things. And you seem to be open to like ignoring the Supreme Court. That is like very fundamentally illiberal. At that point, when you do that, you are saying in effect that liberalism is not enough to get us through this moment. Like we can't survive this moment any longer. Or when you talk about the unraveling the norm of an independent DOJ, that is also a highly liberal principle of like equal application of the law, free from any kind of corrupt influence or partisan influence. These are, you're saying, I don't know exactly what you said, but you said you don't consider these things to be like a significant compromise of liberal principles, but I don't know how you could make that point.
Yeah, because a system that allows a fucking guy who attempted a coup running for office, that's illiberal, isn't it?
It is, yes. It is. That was, hang on. I mean, yes, on paper. He was just very transparently corrupt and criminal and this kind of a thing. But just, I'm just trying to get you to just say it, right? Like just say like, okay, yes, I am saying that the fundamental principles of liberalism as applied in the United States are not durable enough to
yes, I'll say that completely. I'll say that like democracy to me or liberalism in general is an ongoing process. It's like an ongoing conversation. And there are going to be things from a 200 or 300-year-old constitution that are not prepared and built for absolutely everything. And there are going to be times in life, you could probably apply this to maybe a few things, but like there are going to be times in a society's existence where its current rule book is insufficient and people who
Absolutely.
are opposed to it, like whether it was Carl Schmitt or like Nazi stuff or whatever, or in America, there are going to be people who are not only able to get through these cracks, but who are also willing to use that system for illiberal ends. And at a point, there might be a place where, like, okay, if this liberal system is insufficiently defending itself, then I don't really see why breaking a rule of that liberal system in order to defend it, if that's the way you defend it, if other ways have been exhausted, then I see a contradiction there, right? Like,
Or
because otherwise
sexual.
you're basically making a choice. It's like, well, we have one liberal move, which is to push the DOJ to do something that is going to look very partisan, right?
I understand everything you're saying. Yeah, I understand everything you're saying.
Or it's going to be to let the fucking insurrectionists run for office.
Okay, I understand everything you're saying. Once you reach that point internally, once you reach the calculation that these liberal institutions and these principles are not only not durable enough to withstand the current like MAGA threat, but they're actually being exploited and used against us to entrench their power.
Yep.
If you're actually saying that, then I think that we should skip to where we're headed with that. And where we're headed with that is a civil war, a violent conflict to determine who gets to be in positions of power in this country. I just want people to acknowledge that. I think like once you put it in those terms, then I think the reality maybe starts to feel a little bit different. You might be more reticent to, you know, break glass in case of an emergency type of a situation. You might be more inclined to say, well, hang on. Maybe we're not there yet. Maybe we're being severely tested right now. And maybe we should violate this or that norm. Maybe we should implement, we should do things like in California, like the redistricting thing that like violate our liberal principles, but are necessary tactically in the moment to beat MAGA. You know, I guess my argument is that I feel like we are skipping so many steps before we've reached your prescriptive analysis here. Like, we haven't even really like, and this is one of the reasons why I talk about the current state of MAGA. Is because when you look at the Republican Party right now, they're the weakest any party has been since 2010 with the Democrats when they got just fucking crushed in the midterms. Mm-hmm. That's the state of the current Republican Party now.
Weakest in the sense of polling or like performances and races, or what do you mean weakest?
They're weak in the sense of polling, not just polling, but electoral results. Like they are getting, I don't know how much, I mean, like this is like really niche. You have to be really plugged in to know about like special elections and these kinds of things. But the margins that Democrats are slaughtering Republicans right now in special elections, and then we had an off-cycle election in November, are the biggest margins that we've seen in over 2 decades.
You're talking about Sherrill and Spanberger, like
not just them. There's special elections that happen all over the country. We've had dozens.
Yeah, no, I've been aware of it. I've been aware of a few of them. Yeah, there's also like these like AG elections and stuff like that as well in states, right? Like things like that.
Yeah. So and then we have like state supreme courts. Like there's some states where the people elect the judges that serve on the state supreme courts, and so the voters themselves determine the makeup of the court if it's a majority liberal or majority conservative. It's also, just to put it in a different way, like you know what reconciliation packages are?
I do, but remind me anyway.
So we have the filibuster, right? And so you need the 60 votes. And so to get around the filibuster, because we just need to be able to, you know, like anyways, I'll just be really simple. It's like if a piece of legislation meets a particular kind of criteria, namely, if it doesn't contribute to, like, if it doesn't affect our budget for longer than 10 years, then you can do 1 or 2 or 3 of those a year with just a simple majority in the Senate. Okay. And so the one big beautiful bill, do you remember that bill that passed last year in June or July? That was a budget reconciliation package. So like the ARP, the American Rescue Plan, when Biden was president, that was a reconciliation package. The IRA, the significant climate bill that Biden got passed in 2022, that was a reconciliation package. And so they already did their reconciliation package last year. We're in a new year. We're in a new calendar year. So they have the ability, if they had the votes and the consensus, to go for another reconciliation bill this year. And they're just not doing it. Like, they're just openly saying the party is such a mess right now that we don't even feel confident that we could get another bill done. So they're just giving up on that. Every Republican strategist right now, all over the country, knows that they are going to get fucking decimated this November. The Senate is in play for Democrats right now. It's still tough. Like, we would have to really run the board. We'd have to flip a seat in Alaska, flip a seat in Maine, flip a seat in North Carolina, flip a seat in Texas. But it is in play because our margins are so fucking insane right now. So the state of the Republican Party right now is really bad. Like, they are down fucking bad. Yeah. And so when you acknowledge that reality, I don't know why you wouldn't first, before doing these break glass in case of emergency things, I don't know why you wouldn't just try to do what we've always done in this country when it's been threatened by illiberal or corrupt actors, which is build a political movement, build consensus, win elections, do activism, do demonstrations. We're like skipping 1,000 steps and jumping to the fucking Basil tweet.
Wait. I feel like I'm saying this for the 5th time now, though. Like, I'm saying I'm fine. I'm good with doing things the right way first. I'm talking about anticipating situations where this doesn't work. So obviously right now is different from even pre-2024 election, right? Because Democrats aren't in office. So yeah, if what's working for if what they're doing right now is working for them, then yeah, I don't think they should go and change their messaging to we're going to use any means to get Trump in jail, just like they did with, and even if it means like getting rid of fucking habeas corpus, whatever the fuck, like, or define the Supreme Court in another way. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when we anticipate a situation where doing things the right way isn't working, or as I believe was kind of the case in 2024, like once we're already in that position, like say once Merrick Garland has been chosen for the head of the DOJ, or once maybe Newsom comes in and he tries things the right way and it doesn't work and he gets shot down by the Supreme Court, or he gets shot down or hamstrung, I guess, or sandbagged by the DOJ for whatever reason, then in those situations, that's when it has to happen. I'm not saying, I feel like I've said this a few times now, but I'm not saying to just do it right away and ditch like this current strategy, because right now Democrats aren't even in office. Why would they say that they're going to come in and bust every norm to keep Trump in, to get Trump in jail or to have accountability? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I would probably think it's more likely than not that they're going to get into a position where doing things the right way isn't going to be enough. Like, it's not going to achieve the safeguarding of democracy.
Well, if that's really the frame, I do. If that's really how you feel about it, then I feel like we are 100% aligned. And
no, we're not 100% aligned, because I'm not going to, because when it gets to that position, when it gets to the state that, okay, Trump actually did try to coup the government, he should not be allowed to run for office, he should be in jail. And then the Supreme Court says, oh, well, excuse me, Mr. Newsom, that's, those were all official acts. I'm sorry. Trump is A-okay. He can run again if he wants.
Well, wait. No, wait.
Obviously, he can't run again because of 2 terms, but if we're in that position and they defy the court and they say, okay, I'm sorry, democracy comes first, fuck you, then I'm completely okay with them doing that. And I don't consider it civil war territory. It might be civil conflict, but we're kind of already, America's already in civil conflict.
But no, hang on. How could this particular thing first of all, like, it really depends on what else is going on in the country. But I would never tell you right now that I would never be okay with someone like a Democratic president just ignoring the Supreme Court.
You said it's civil war territory, right?
It is.
Like,
yes.
It has to be in that context.
So, but what I'm saying, LonerBox, is that I'm not telling you that that day may never come. I'm not telling you that will never be necessary. I of course am open to the possibility of, like, okay, we need to break this glass because there's just no option. I mean, you appealed to Abraham Lincoln before. I mean, he blatantly tossed out many rules, but that was civil war. And so it's like, you can't hold a president who is in the midst of a civil war like that to the same sort of standards of fidelity to the Constitution and the liberal order of things in the same way that you would have somebody now. It's just like such an unfair.
It's not
comparison.
the same way. It's just like, it sounds like you're suggesting that civil war is the only context in which that's acceptable. But I don't know why that's the case. Why?
No, what I'm saying is, if you're doing that, then you need to be prepared to acknowledge that you are by doing that, signaling an openness to a civil war, because that is, there's little things that Trump can do, or not so little things that can kind of chip away at democracy or try to unravel it or kind of test the boundaries to see how far he can go. And all of these things are extremely alarming and potentially really damaging and could portend some really awful things down the line. But once you make a decision like that specific one of just like blatantly, the court says you have to release someone from prison, and then you say no, at that point you need to, I'm not saying it's going to become a civil war, but if you're going to take that decision, you need to be able to say, like, I understand that this risks civil war, and I'm saying that it's necessary.
Like Trump did with essentially did with January 6th, right?
He was for sure like willing to, yes, his intention I think he literally wanted them to fucking murder Congress people.
Yeah, listen, if Republicans want to go to civil war, if Republicans want to start a civil war for the fucking fat leaking disgusting cunt president who basically sacrificed a bunch of his supporters in January 6th as well, if they want to go to the mat for him to keep him out of jail for something that he's been convicted of at this point apparently, yeah, fuck him. I think Democrats should stand their ground and be like, okay, well, like, if you're really going to do that, then you're like, if Republicans are going to come out and try to start fucking shooting people to defend their fucking daddy-o from being convicted of crimes that he's committed, and everyone knows that he's committed at this point, then Democrats should stand their ground. I don't think that necessarily means it'll be civil war. I think most Republicans will just fucking run off with their tails between their legs. But shit, because otherwise, you're just letting them threaten civil war for. Would you say define the Supreme Court to keep someone in jail? Do you think that's more or less of a signal to civil war than January 6th was?
Oh, I think that's more. I think
really?
That's more.
Define the Supreme Court as more of a signal to openness to civil war than January 6th was.
I do. I could give you practical. I could give you a practical reason why. I mean, the what happened on January 6th was horrifying, and the risks that day were significant. But that militia versus like the girthy cock of like the United States military, like I think the worst that could have happened that day is that a ton of like Congress people like would have died, and then like the army would have come in and just like massacred them. Like, I don't know if it represents, hang on, let me think about this for a second. Hang on.
Because think of what Trump was trying to achieve, right?
No, I understand. I'm thinking about it. That is tough. I mean, I would say that they're comparable. Like, they're comparable. I mean, there's no doubt that Donald Trump was willing to risk civil war on January 6th. And I like that. That's nobody would argue against that. But if you're someone like Newsom and the Supreme Court hands down a decision that says, your case against Trump was unconstitutional, you have to release him from prison, and then Newsom says no, that at that point you are opening a kind of door that is just impossible to close in the short term. And if you're taking that kind of step, then at that point, I don't know why you wouldn't do anything in your power to keep Donald Trump imprisoned or, maintain your own power. Because what happens if you play that out right and then political violence explodes across the country and you got militia people that are fucking kidnapping, state legislature politicians and U.S. representatives and senators. And then at that point, it's like, let's say it's an election year. Do you cancel the election, right? Like, what if there's a Republican running and they're polling at 70% because they're disgusted that the Democratic Party is violating the Supreme Court's decision in that kind of way? If you really thought, like, for the sake of the Republic, I'm willing to defy the Supreme Court and keep Donald Trump in jail, why wouldn't you cancel the election, LonerBox? Like, just answer that question. Like, would Newsom be justified in canceling an election if he was in an election year and his Republican opponent shot up to 80% in the polls after the Supreme Court decision?
Well, Well, no, obviously, because elections I think are integral to like I value fair and free elections much more highly than I do the particular people who make a decision in the Supreme Court.
But if the
Unfortunately,
Republican wins, they're going to pardon Donald Trump and let him out of jail, right?
Oh, they're running on that.
Well, that would obviously happen.
Okay. I suspending election. I still think because I still think that's probably a harder question. I still don't think. I think I'm justified in finding that a harder question because elections are much more integral to liberalism and democracy than Supreme Court decisions are. Personally, but I'm still. I don't know if that's probably the best answer I'm gonna give right now. But I'm still thinking like going back to the question about it's maybe easier for you to say what you said about January 6th and Newsom ignoring the Supreme Court because Trump failed on January 6th. But you remember what he was trying to do, right? He was
of course,
perfectly greenlighting, kidnapping legislators. The softest version of what he wanted was to delay for a long enough period the vote certification so they could move on and pressure people even harder. He also wanted Mike Pence to just make him president on the day. So,
but our institutions, I'm thankful that our institutions held that day. I'm thankful that
Mike Pence held really like that's the big game changer there. Like,
yes, I mean not just
of that was just like in the hands of one person, really.
Not just him. It was also Republican lawmakers and politicians at the state level that refused to go along with the elector schemes in like several states that were governed by Republicans. But I just, respectfully, I don't understand the logic of I would be willing to defy a Supreme Court order and keep a man imprisoned after they said that it was unconstitutional for him to be imprisoned, and then not cancel an election if my popularity dropped down to 15% and then Vance is polling at like 80%. Like, why would you do one but not the other? Like, why would you violate a Supreme Court? You seem to be almost arbitrarily.
Because I value elections more than the Supreme Court, than the Supreme Court making an obviously brain rotted decision.
But before you
like, do you see how in one example, like the Supreme Court is literally making a very to me a fundamentally like illiberal decision. Like there's just no accountability for being the president who basically who was happy to fuck the Constitution and would have like ruled by decree if he could.
Well, I think I don't understand how you arrive at the conclusion that elections themselves are a fundamental pillar of liberal democracy that you would be unwaveringly loyal to, but the fundamental principle of checks on authority and separation of powers and co-equal branches of government, that's not similarly incredibly important to you? To me, they're very comparable in terms of...
Well, I'm in the same bag as Lincoln, didn't he? Because Lincoln held elections even though he went against the Supreme Court.
Right, but you would be, at that moment, you would be, in essence, initiating a civil war by doing something like a significant risk of initiating a civil war by defying a Supreme Court order in this kind of way. And I just, I really don't understand how you could justify that.
Because it's like to me, it's like saying, so first of all, I will just completely go against you and just say, like, definitively, January 6th was it signaled more of an openness to civil war than defying the Supreme Court to put an insurrectionist in jail. To me, January 6th was obviously more of a effective declaration of civil war than going against the Supreme Court. And when I see that, then to me, it's like the same as, there's this military like on our border and they're firing like a couple of little pot shots at us with their rockets. But if we fire like a fifth of the bombs back against their rocket launchers, then we're risking a war. Well, no, not really. It's more just like the tit for tat is already happening. And it just sounds like one side is more scared of doing things that would aggro the other side than the other one is.
Listen, the Democratic Party, we could, if we want to, go tit for tat and just use every bit of authority that Donald Trump has used in the exact same ways, but applied in a different direction. We can certainly do that. But would you agree that if a country is faced with a moment where a political movement is drifting away from liberalism, away from the principles of democracy in a two-party system, that it's probably no, not probably. It is necessary for the other party to be fighting to preserve that system, and and even just if we approach it from a different way, like I think strategically or tactically, President Newsom ignoring the Supreme Court in this spot just makes no fucking strategic sense, because it would be the most predictable thing in the world that his popularity would plummet, and along with it, the Democratic Party's popularity would plummet, which would propel the next Republican candidate to a sweeping landslide victory. Donald Trump just gets removed from office, and after you've already ignored the Supreme Court, now what's stopping Vance from being like, you know what? I'm just going to appoint Donald Trump as president again. You know, like, don't you understand that you're setting some things in motion that represent significant escalations even to the current moment? And I don't understand how tactically that makes any sense.
On the one hand, I don't ever buy this idea that people like Vance or Trump or like any kind of authoritarian or fascist kind of person, I don't think that their actions are ever conditional on how like mean, or I'm using mean trivially here, but I just mean like how nasty the other side is being to them. I think their behavior is conditional on what they're allowed to get away with. And
no. This is not true. No, why did they pull out of Minnesota? Why did they pull ICE out of Minnesota?
I don't know. Tell me.
Because they faced significant political pressure. Because they responded to. Well, you just said that they would just do anything that they thought they could get away with. Why would they do that?
That doesn't contradict what I'm saying. They face pressure, and that's why they're pushed out. But that's not what I mean. What I mean is.
Well, I mean, you said they're not going to respond to Democrats being mean to them, but I really
no. I mean in the other way around. I mean like as in like they're not this idea that if Democrats do one mean thing to them, or if they break a precedent against them, then what's to stop them from using that as an excuse to do that? I mean, the other way around, right? I mean, this idea that if we're aggro them too much, then they'll go harder against us. I don't buy that side of things.
What do you mean you don't? What do you mean you don't buy it?
I just don't think that's how they work. Like in the same way that people saying like, oh no, if we stop fucking Hitler from taking Czechoslovakia, then he might get more angry later and be more aggressive towards Poland or something. Like, because this is one of the arguments. Like we want to avoid a regional war, but really what he was doing was he was taking all these concessions as a way to just build himself up to do more later on. I said I don't think this like being nicer to them changes their opinions. That changes their behavior at all.
I take issue with that phrasing. It's not about being nicer to them. That's like a really
or even being more operating like within the rules. I don't think like breaking the rules gives them license to do something that they wouldn't have done anyway. That's what I'm saying.
Does any okay in the general hypothetical, I mean, it could be any country on earth. If you have a situation where the political climate has devolved and you have one party that is becoming more and more illiberal and seems to be challenging the system, and you think that system is worth preserving, does the party that is in favor of preserving liberalism have any responsibility to uphold and fight for those liberal values? It's not about being nice to the party that is challenging liberal democracy. It's about the system itself.
That was a bad choice of words. When I say being nice, I'm meaning very specifically in the sense of like staying within the rules. Because because they believe that if they go beyond the rules, then they're giving the other side license to do more.
Well, why do you think that Republicans didn't get rid of the filibuster this term?
I don't know. Because what you're going to say? Because Democrats didn't do it first, or?
Well, I mean, there's been many Republicans that have gone on the record to say why they oppose it. I mean, it's the same rationale every single term. I mean, this comes up every single term for both parties. Like, there's always some wing of the party that's pushing the party to get rid of the filibuster, and you always hear the same thing from both sides in this spot, which is, that's a really dangerous game to play, because if we do that, the other side is just going to wield that.
But that's still different, because that's not them responding to acts of restraint, or that's not them responding to, that's them doing something because they're literally afraid of retaliation, right? Because I guess Republicans know that they struggle to get like in terms of elections, like their electoral college is their crutch. So that's more what I would advocate for. Like, I think Republicans should be scared to do things. That's how they should be motivated. Like, they should be motivated because they should anticipate that Democrats will actually like come back to bite them in the ass for whatever they do.
Well, I mean, in this case, I do think that they are scared about what the Democrats are going to do if they get rid of the filibuster first. I think they are scared. I mean, they talk about it like very openly, and that they say, you know, that is our big concern. That is our big fear. That does motivate them.
Yeah, but you understand that if Republicans thought they could, that wasn't a risk. If Republicans thought they could only get wins from ending the filibuster, they would do it, right? Do you think they wouldn't?
Yeah, no, sure, obviously, but like,
yeah,
but they
so
are
none of them
afraid,
are going to say none of the argument
afraid.
that Democrats haven't dared to do it. Like that's not going to help, is it?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it does actually.
Oh.
I think it does. Yeah. I think the fact that the Democrats have had similarly, they've had opportunities to scrap the filibuster a number of times in the last like 40 years and they haven't done it. And so there's this sort of unspoken kind of treaty that takes place in the halls of the Senate. But, you know, if the Republican Party right now felt like the Democrats were sure to get rid of the filibuster in the next term, then I think that they would probably have the votes to get rid of it. But this idea that the Republican Party, the politicians, are not at all beholden to the shoe being on the other foot, or concerns about that, fear about that, they're not beholden to political pressure. I don't think that's entirely true. I think that, and especially in the Senate, there are more Republicans that are willing to break from Trump, rebuke Trump, not give him the kind of vote that he wants. I just don't think that this is like a very clean assessment of American politics.
No, but what I don't think you're quite getting what I'm saying.
Maybe not.
What I'm saying is that Republicans are, the way to motivate Republicans is exactly through fear of consequence and through negative reinforcement. That seems to be how they learn things. So their motive, I think, for the filibuster is apparently it's like what you said. It's like they're afraid of what would happen if the shoe were on the other foot. I think that's really the only way that you can sort of convince them to stay within the rules. I don't think, but this idea of like, oh, if
I don't disagree. So if that's the point you're making, I don't disagree that demonstrating real accountability is a pretty strong disincentive for future Republicans who may otherwise have been corrupt.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying because so whenever you say, oh, what if they defied the Supreme Court, and then that leads to Vance saying, oh, well, you defied the Supreme Court, so we're going to come in, I'm just going to appoint Trump again, and I'll defy the Supreme Court to do that. Well, then I'm thinking, okay, but then it's like, what if you tell the Republicans that oh, you guys kind of just got away with it? Trump is like walking free. The Trump 2.0 is going to run again, and they're just going to do all the same shit that Trump said. They're going to disagree with the election results if they lose. All this kind of shit, then it's like, okay, well, how does that not embolden them to just keep on doing what they're doing? So I can easily put the same thing back around, right?
Well, sure. I mean, it might, but again, my whole prescription here is aggressive reforms, like aggressive liberal.
Yeah, but then we're back to then we're full circle on whether or not these aggressive reforms work, because I'm obviously talking about these measures that I support, anticipating that these reforms don't work. Either they get blocked in the Congress or they get fucked by the court.
Listen, if you're that, again, like we're circling back to my point, which is like, if you're really that black-pilled that you can't imagine America getting past this moment through gradual reforms, if you really can't imagine that, then I understand being willing to basically temporarily abandon liberalism if you felt like that was existentially necessary. Which is why I asked you, that's why I asked you to sort of summarize how you feel about America in the current moment, like where we're at. Where I'm at with that is, I don't know, are you familiar with she's an academic called Erica Chenoweth?
No.
Sorry, that's probably not a fair question to ask. You have to be like pretty online, and it's pretty niche, but she's this academic researcher, and she went on Pod Save America last June or July. And she talked about, she's this academic who studied like resistance movements and civil rights movements all over the world over the last 100 years. And she was evaluating the effectiveness of like violent versus nonviolent resistance. And so she took she dove into, I mean, she researched this for like years, her and a team of people. And her evaluation of the current moment is something that like really resonated with me, which is that we're in a period of a kind of like unraveling. It's like a beginning stage of a kind of unraveling. And then the question just becomes like, well, what do you think are the likely risks here? And like, what do you think we should compromise now to like head these things off, which is essentially what you and I are talking about right now. But I guess the difference between you and me is that I think, before you have hypothetical President Newsom, just ignoring the Supreme Court, which, that I don't know how you could dismiss the idea of like, that would lead to much, much, much worse outcomes with hypothetical Vance, who comes in, and wins in a landslide. And, and at that point, like as much as Donald Trump right now is like chipping away at our institutions and, challenging the liberal order, challenging the rule of law, just like completely flouting any kind of anti-corruption norms or laws. We are not at a point yet where the guardrails have collapsed. Like we do still have guardrails. He cannot just unilaterally adopt legislation. He cannot prevent California from redistricting and netting 5 more seats. He is beholden to the courts, and he's even like checking. He's testing his boundaries with the courts right now too. But he cannot cancel elections. We are going to have midterms in November, and he is going to lose by like his party is going to get thrashed. I mean, surely you would agree that as of right now, the system itself, it may be stretched like fucking Spider-Man 2, Tobey Maguire on the train or whatever. Like that's kind of the moment we're in. Like surely you would agree that the system itself has not like collapsed yet, right?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that part. Like, it's not completely over. Like, there's still hope. But right. People would say that. I'm typically of the position that like historical examples as well. Like, there are people who think that like fucking like Germany was basically doomed to go fucking Nazi at some point or the other. But then there are others who I tend to agree with who say that even up until like late 1932, there were still opportunities to basically turn the whole thing around. Like, I'm with that latter opinion. Again, I'm going to reject again. I feel like I've done it a few times now. I'm going to reject the idea that I considered like what I'm saying to be abandoning liberalism, because again, it's more just like, to me, I don't know. It becomes an oxymoron when you're abandoning liberalism to save liberalism, or abandoning liberalism when the mechanisms within this particular liberal society aren't working to save it, to preserve itself. Then to me, that's just like an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense.
Well, maybe
regardless.
I don't mean to mischaracterize what you're saying. Maybe I should be more specific and say that you would be willing to temporarily compromise liberal values in the face of an existential threat, which is reasonable. Like, right? Like it would be justified if you're in a liberal system and there's some outside force or inside force that is truly like an immediate, acute, existential threat, then obviously you would not make it so that you're beholden to a set of rules.
In the sense that I think that things like this can even sometimes become part of the liberal system, in the way that like in certain European countries, I think even Brazil does this as well. I think where it's allowed, it's part of the system to ban political parties if they cross particular thresholds, i.e. threats to democracy or whatever else, or like say if the UK is suspending elections to get through World War II, like things like this, to me, like I think they can become inbuilt to liberal societies, which is why, even if I want to go more specifically, because I think that Supreme Court thing is the one that we got kind of stuck on. The problem I get with that one, and why I don't think it's necessarily as illiberal as you're making it out to be, is that it seems that the Constitution does say that if you attempt insurrection or rebellion, that you can't run for office, right? But they don't say that it has to be a legal definition of insurrection.
Well, the function of the courts the function of the courts in America are to interpret the text of the Constitution and apply the law in a way that they feel is consistent with that Constitution. And so, like we rely, like the people, the court or the branch of judgment, the branch of government that decide that kind of thing. And so, I don't even think technically it's in the Constitution that the president has to listen to the Supreme Court, but like this was the purpose of the judiciary. And so, once you just ignore the Supreme Court, I think it's really, maybe it doesn't happen in the first year or the second year, but like once one president just blatantly ignores the court in that kind of way, Well, like surely you would argue, right, that if Donald Trump,
What if they found like the same way that Trump does with the tariffs, like they found a way around it, like for example, because I don't know how, like, again, this would be more of
then
a legal
yeah,
theory argument, but if you've got this situation where the Constitution says this thing, that someone who does this engages in this act, which Trump definitely has, and he can't run for office again, but then who enforces that 14th Amendment provision? And then I think the Supreme Court said the Congress in that ruling, but then they also had several concurring opinions that actually went against that and said they shouldn't have gone that far. But then you get into a situation where it's like, what if, so you have this provision in the Constitution, but it literally is unenforceable because half the society doesn't believe in democracy and they don't think that Trump should get put in jail,
yeah,
or disqualified. Do you see where I'm getting here?
yeah,
Where
no,
you've got again this conundrum where okay, the Supreme Court's saying one thing and that's violating a norm, but the Supreme Court's also kind of violating a norm because there's nothing in place to get this person disqualified if they're saying the Congress has to enforce this provision. So it's
right, right. I understand. So I understand everything you're saying. The court right now, the Supreme Court is fucked, completely fucked. And there's not a lot of like great answers right now. In the immediate moment, we have no options. We're the party out of power. We don't have the presidency. And so at least for the next 3 years, there's just like very little we can do, like practically or realistically, to rein in the courts. I am not making the argument that we should just accept the current makeup of the court. In fact, I'm making a very much different argument that we should aggressively pursue reforms that will make it so that this problem doesn't arise in the future. Like 15-year term limits is one thing that I see thrown around. If you could just do one reform right now, I would pick, if I could only pick one, I would probably pick 15-year term limits over packing the court, because in the long run, you're dealing with the problem in a much more lasting way. But the compromise there that you're making is you're going to deal with some short-term fuckery with this court. And I guess what I'm saying is I don't understand how you could justify hypothetical Newsom jumping straight to, well, let's just ignore the court, when we have remedies to this situation. There are legal mechanisms and constitutional mechanisms to address the court. I mean, the FDR got kind of close to whipping the votes to be able to expand the court at the time. That is an option. We can impeach judges if we want to. There's certainly probably an arguable case there for Alito and Clarence Thomas with their shenanigans. You're just skipping all that and you're jumping straight to, just ignore the court.
Well, again, when I'm skipping it, this is more just because I just don't know like all the details of like the American system. But it's like we're going more with like the principle of assuming that these correct ways haven't worked. That's kind of why I'm saying that.
How many?
Because even before any of that mentioned, you said maybe like when it came to the courts, if they were refusing to allow Trump to get held accountable in the future, right?
Maybe I would be on board with him ignoring a Supreme Court. Did I say that?
Yeah. It sounded like that, wasn't it? Or were you saying maybe it's something else? If your answer would actually be no, then that's okay. Okay.
No, I don't recall if I said that, but I mean,
it sounds like your answer is no. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
There would be some situation. Again, if I came to the internal calculation that the risk of this, like a significant risk of civil war, is unavoidable. The second I reach that calculation, then I'm on board with profoundly illiberal, or I should say, rather, you don't like that framing, but like, then I'm on board with temporarily pausing fidelity to the Constitution and liberal principles if it means a significant risk of war. And that's obviously a very different calculation. I think I mentioned this before, but I think that's the difference between where I'm at and where you are at, and a lot of people in my chat and my podcast co-host and Destiny. I think that this moment is dangerous. It is an incredibly pivotal moment in American history. But I also look back on American history, and we've had a lot of moments like this, and we've had a lot of, Jim Crow was obviously profoundly illiberal that took 100 years for that to be remedied. And there were people who were at the time internally prepared. I mean, there were black civil rights leaders back in the fucking 20s and the 30s who were well aware that they were like decades away probably from getting the kind of legislation that they wanted to. But nevertheless, they persisted within the system itself. And they never backed away from, sustained electoral engagement and harm reduction principles and these kinds of things. If they were able to endure that humiliation and indignity for fucking 100 years without wanting to advocate for just like, abandoning the system or opening ourselves up to civil war, I don't really understand what excuse we have right now in the context of 10 years of Trump, especially given the sad, pathetic, weakened, fragile state of the current Republican Party. We do have a big opportunity in 2028 to swing big and actually do big reforms. Like if we can whip enough support to get rid of the filibuster and pass these reforms, then we could actually make a pretty big difference, like very quickly. I guess I'm not as black pilled about the state of things right now. Shit sucks. Shit's very not cash money at the moment, but I'm not internally resigned to America like falling just yet. I might get there.
One thing that I find kind of blackpilling that you're saying, or it sounds like you're saying, is that it just sounds like, and I think you probably speak to more Democrats than I do when you say this, like the fear of civil war because of that going against the Supreme Court order or whatever else. To me, that just sounds like Democrats are just more scared of what the other side will do, because I don't know how many Republicans were sitting there before January 6th or doing all those electoral fraud lies and not thinking like, maybe, is this not kind of risking a civil war here? But with Democrats, it's like, well, using the Supreme Court to put a criminal in jail or defying the Supreme Court to put a criminal in jail is like, that's where bringing them in fear of civil war. You know what I mean? It sounds like there's an issue there with.
That's one way to put it. Another way to put it would be, if you're telling me right now that the Republican side of the aisle, not just politicians, but the actual voters themselves, that they are way more open to a civil war in this moment than the Democrats are, then you're correct. I think you're correct about that. I think there's way more people in this country that are just like ready for shit to pop off and almost eager for shit to pop off.
Yeah, because they probably listen to conversations like this, right? The Republican HQ is listening to us talking and we're like, these Democrats, look at it. We did January 6th and they're out here fucking bricking it over defying a Supreme Court order just to put a criminal in jail. Fucking losers.
Well,
of course they want a civil war because they think they'll win against the fanny Democrats.
Listen, I'm gonna chalk this up this up to your UK brain here, because the idea of like just blatantly ignoring a Supreme Court decision in that way, that does activate my America brain and definitely signals to me in that moment that we're in a new kind of paradigm, like a much more significant escalation in that moment than the current moment. Yeah. But can I give you the reason?
Look what the Republicans made us do, eh? Those fucking assholes. Sorry, go on.
Can I give you the reason why I'm a little bit more bullish on America than I think a lot of the black-pilled people in my mentions and all that?
Wait. I guess they would probably take issue with you saying that you're more bullish on America than they are, right? Like what you're talking about, like Josiah and Pisco and Destiny, or
when I say bullish on America, I mean our capacity to endure in this moment and survive and make it through to a better outcome without like significant violence or upheaval.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And just tell me if you disagree, but like, so first of all, one of the reasons, and it's directly relevant to what we're talking about, one of the reasons why I'm still pretty bullish on America in the sense that, like, I recognize the threat, but I think we're more likely to succeed than not, is we have the benefit of having institutions that are way more robust and way more durable than the kind of governments that we think about throughout history in different countries that succumb to, the whims of a madman or a tyrant. You would agree that our institutions are much stronger than Italy's and Germany, in the post-World War I era, right?
United Kingdom's still doing better though. Sorry, but yes, I understand. Yes.
Whoa,
Germany and Italy were fucked. Yeah.
I also think that we have an incredible benefit being human beings that exist in 2026 because we do have the benefit of hindsight. And the fascists at the time in Italy and Germany, they didn't have the hindsight of knowing that fascism was pretty not tight and would result in the deadliest conflict that the world has ever known, and 12 million people dead in concentration camps and these kinds of things. But like us having that benefit of hindsight, I think equips Americans to be vigilant about these things. So were you at all encouraged when you saw like tens of thousands of people marching in Minnesota in sub-zero temperatures? Like, did that make you feel like a little bit better about like the people itself here in this country and our capacity to sort of like resist that kind of tyranny?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
That made me feel like warm and fuzzy when I saw that. I also think that like the benefit of being an American in 2026 faced with the threat of Trump is that we have, while a lot of people are not like super engaged in politics, on balance, people in this country are way more engaged and informed than they would have been 100 years ago, before everybody had like a TV and a radio, and literacy rates were much lower, and so there's a lot of like disengaged people, there's a lot of like silly people with silly opinions. But would you agree that like on balance, like the modern American is going to be way more aware of what's happening in their country than 100 years ago?
Yeah, of course, but it's also that thing where it's like, yeah, I guess like occasionally the fucking Churchill saying we'll fight them on the beaches is kind of warm and fuzzy, I suppose. But it's also like, oh shit, like this probably could have been nipped in the bud a lot earlier, right? And he probably felt that as well, right? Because of the fucking appeasement shit. So yeah, that goes both ways. And I do think there were, like, I'm still in the position that, like, say after Merrick Garland's been picked, at some point Biden realizes it was a mistake and has to put his thumb on the scale to get this whole insurrection shit dealt with. Like, to me, that does seem like a lost opportunity.
Yeah, obviously I don't disagree with you there. I guess like when I play out I get this a lot. Like people hit me a lot with like, well, what happens if he cancels the midterms? What happens if he sends ICE to the polling stations? What happens if he, and there's like 50 different things, right? And I fully understand why people feel so vigilant about those things. And I'm not even saying it's a bad thing that people be really vigilant, even to the point of being unreasonable or paranoid. It's probably it would probably advantage us for people to be over vigilant than under vigilant. But when I play out your logic of like, yeah, we could try these reforms, but I just don't think it'll be enough. Are you not, in saying that, are you not just making the case to just fucking kick things off in Minecraft? Like, why wait? Let's just fucking kick things off in Minecraft. If we're really like headed to a situation of civil Minecraft, why don't we launch the first salvo in Minecraft? Why wait? Let's just start Minecrafting things, right?
No, because you have to say that you probably still have to say that you tried.
Well, that seems like a formality, the way you put it, right? If it's really a formality, let's
no, it's like I'm not, because again, like I don't, like, in the way that you're saying that this defile of the Supreme Court is basically like almost a foregone conclusion to Civil War territory. I can't really predict the future with that level of certainty. So I can say I think it's unlikely that just reform will meet the volume of the problem, but I'm not like so confident in that I would fucking tell people in another country to pick up arms and expect like or to actually make these groundbreaking decisions first. Yeah, I'm not like, I'm just saying it's more likely than not that it won't work, that it won't be enough. But
okay, I see.
That's not a reason to go against the thing. Also, this fucking this is probably for another time, but apparently the FCC did actually have opportunities to do things about Murdoch and Fox News, specifically to do with broadcast licenses, because he basically revealed himself to be of poor character for saying that he could have stopped them from lying about Dominion, but didn't.
Yeah, if you have a article on, I'm not familiar with any of that.
This is an article I haven't fully read, okay, but apparently it's just something about, like, I'm just glancing at it right now, and it's saying stuff about how the FCC used to have more teeth than or that they could have, yeah, but also just like limits based on whether or not it's cable TV versus like Fox News, which I think is a bit different. But
yeah.
I'll have to look into it though.
Well, then I guess
But I guess if to you, to you, it just sounds like you are more open to these norm busting maneuvers if you can find a specific example that's more convincing to you. So maybe that's just going to be like my little project for the next week or two, is to find one and then come back to you with it. If you want to get a conclusion from this debate.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I would love to follow up. I enjoy these conversations.
Is that a fair summary though? Like, to be clear?
Yeah, it seems like we don't disagree too much in the present, that we should endeavor to try to fix things through reforms for the time being. It seems like the big source of disagreement is, at what point do you kick off the party in Minecraft and Minecraft a Walmart, like a Walmart, you know? It seems like my threshold, like my perspective is that you should, at every step of the way, evaluate the risk of what you're doing and then ask yourself, like, does this dramatically swing the pendulum towards like a civil war, or like civil war? It's like, whatever, call it whatever you want, like mass violence, mass political and social upheaval that would probably devastate the economy, and it would probably significantly diminish America's role on the world stage, which in turn would embolden the worst authoritarian governments. And so there's like massive chain reaction. So like, I'm thinking about like that kind of catastrophe, which I don't know why people would just dismiss the possibility of this. I think people should take that like really seriously. I'm not saying that you're not, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of people in my chat, for example, they just don't really seem to think that this is like worth making not insane, but like significant efforts to avoid. That's my whole thing, is like, that outcome is so nightmarish to me and so dystopian that I do want to, at every step of the way, make sure that I'm able to say, or hope that the Democrats are able to say, that they did everything in their power to avoid that outcome before it happened. But at the same time, if that moment becomes necessary, then of course I'm completely with you and all the other Minecraft people. It's like, either we Minecraft ourselves, or Minecraft just kind of do shit like that, go like kick things off. And yeah. It seems like that's the big, it seems like that's it seems like that's the only disagreement, maybe. It's just like the timing of when we Minecraft in Minecraft.
No, I don't know. There's probably more of a more fundamental disagreement about like I guess the idea of militant democracy in general, but can probably flesh that out at a future date.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm getting vibes here. You want to take off? Is that what you're doing? It doesn't hurt my feelings. I'm fine.
No, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, because I feel like it's gone on for quite a while. I'm just thinking about the VODs. Okay, 4 hours versus 3. Yeah, right.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Go do.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about besides that?
No, and my feelings are not hurt right now. Definitely not. I'm fine.
Dude,
I said it was fine.
It's very unsettling.
No, I'm not.
Hey,
Listen.
Someone's saying Josiah wants to come in. I know Counterpoint said he wants to, but I have no idea if they're still kicking around.
Oh fuck! Wait, loner points or loner points? Jesus Christ!
Counterpoints, yeah, counter.
Ponder points. Wait, pondering one.
Yeah.
Wait,
pondering, yeah, but I don't know if either of them are actually still kicking around. So.
Okay. All right. Well, you go do your thing, and then I'll tell you what. I'll look into. What did you call it? Militant democracy or defensive democracy? Is that what it's called?
Militant democracy is kind of what it's called, yeah.
Okay, I'll look into. We'll come back in a month, and in that time I'll.
A month.
Well, I mean, 2 weeks.
That's a lot of crap.
Hey, listen, if you want to.
2 weeks.
If you're saying you want to hang out sooner than that, then that makes me feel better about you rejecting me.
Next week.
Okay. No, wait, no, not next week. Give me 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks to look into it. Okay.
Damn. Okay.
All right, buddy. Cool. Well, listen. Take her easy. I really enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, it was fun. You have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.